p.m., July 21st, 2025. Joint Committee presentation to order at 7:31 p.m. I will now take the roll. Matt Ambrose,
Here.
Ken Astorita, Steve Barrett, Rob Blanchard, Lenny Brayman, Peter Britton, Chris Carroll, Colin Colburn, Justin Contrado, Tara Cook-Littman, Nancy Donnie, Eric Druniak, Bob Elwinger, Lori Geldenzi, Josh Garskoff, Drew Georgiadis, Mike Cardigan, Lisa Havey, Margaret Horton, Laura Carson, John Kuhn, Melissa Longo, Christine Ludwigsack, Michelle McCabe, Megan McCloat, Mark McDermott,
Here.
Scott Nickel, Kristen O'Neill, Alexander Ocampo,
Here.
Sharon Pastilli, Pierre Ratsky, Dave Rock, Chris Shea, Brooke Sparacino, Marcy Spolier, I'm here, Jeff Steele. Oh, I see you over there. Karen Wackerman, Cindy Waldron, Jay Woke, and Elizabeth Zedzma. Thank you. Let's all stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance.
Which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence to remember and honor a wonderful person and remarkable leader. First Selectman Bill Gerber. First Selectman Gerber served this town with over a decade of public service. His love and commitment to this town has left a profound and positive impact, which will be long-standing on this town. Thank you. There will be a celebration of First Selectman Gerber's life, which is scheduled for this Friday, the 25th at 10 a.m. at the Martire Family Arena at Sacred Heart. First Selectman Gerber, we will move forward in your memory, continuing your legacy to make this town of Fairfield the best place to live. Thank you, everyone. We're gonna start and call up Chris Baker, who's here regarding a reappointment to the Ethics Commission. I don't see Mr. Baker out there, and I don't see him online.
I'm here.
Oh, great. Hi, Mr. Baker.
How are you?
Welcome. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to continue to serve and get reappointed to the Ethics Commission. For the RTM, this is agenda item 3. Backup for this item can be found on pages 1 to 5.
Yep, super quick. I came in, I think, midterm, and so I've only been there for 3 months. So they've asked me to re-up, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Baker? Members online, if you have a question, please type your name in the chat. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Georgiadis.
Hi, Drew Georgiadis, District 9. Thank you very much for continuing to serve. My question, especially on this committee, is do you have a commitment to serve? We've had times in the past where members have not shown up and not participated and therefore not have a quorum. So are you committed?
Well, I have not missed a meeting yet, and I've had every opportunity to. Now that I'm getting reappointed, I could have just stepped out from here. So yes, I'm committed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Baker? Seeing none, Mr. Baker, thank you so much for coming out. Our town clerk will let you know if we need you here next Monday. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Beretta, who is being considered for to the Ethics Commission, will be here next week. Moving on, Tim Bishop, our Director of Conservation, will be here next week. If we have any questions for him regarding the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection Trails and Greenways Program grant for an open space trail at 150 Villa Ave. Since this item was postponed from our June meeting, I want to make sure that there are not any outstanding questions or concerns that have not been answered with additional information in the backup. We do have Attorney Piers here. If there's any questions that can be answered by him. This is agenda item 4 with backup found on pages 11 to 30. We also have David Becker here as well from the administration. Are there any questions regarding this item? Representative Colburn.
Colin Colburn, District 8. I did have a question in terms of I guess 2 questions. One, when was the last association meeting that was held within Brooklawn? And then 2, have we gotten up and actually with that, were we in attendance? Who was there from the town in terms of representation? And then number 2 is, have we gotten kind of like a pulse check in terms of from the association and the homeowners within the homeowners association, what their feeling is on the plans that we have?
I'm not sure, Mr. Becker or Mr. Attorney Piers, if one of you are able to answer that.
So I can't answer the questions about the meetings. That's beyond what I would be involved in, but I did have a conversation with the chair. The chair is a lawyer, Doug Brown. He's at Brody Wilkinson. He expressed support of the project. They just want to have the ability to meet with the town and talk about it and just basically have input on implementation. So we've connected them with the employees at the town that'll be involved in that, and that will happen.
And what kind of, I guess when we go, will we have to go forth in front of the association to present the plans? Like what's kind of like that process look like, or is it just?
There's no process. That's just the town being a good neighbor.
Okay.
And just, constituent relations.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding this item? Representative Cook-Littman.
So that was basically my question, but I just want to really clarify so that we don't run into another problem, because I remember in last month's meeting, it was kind of like, whoa, 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 the community isn't behind this. It seemed like a much bigger problem. So I just, for clarity's sake, really want to make sure that this community has been engaged. And I don't see the RTM rep who brought the concern last week here to hear from him, but I don't know if anybody else in that district spoke to them. I just want to, right, Josh Garskoff. So I just want to really make sure that then next week we're not going to run into a problem.
Mr. Becker?
Oh, yeah, we don't have to anymore. Good. So from an engagement standpoint, we are in the process of redesigning, the detention ponds on that site. So that is moved to an outside consultant. It's been taken over by, sort of the lead on that now is the capital projects group. This was given to, the manager of that group specifically, the sensitivity of this, to spearhead that and work with them. And then also obviously continue to work with engineering, who spent a lot of time with this, and now conservation, who has an aspect of it. So it's not at a design point yet to go to the neighborhood, but we're working on that. We're hopeful. I would say, just looking at a summer schedule, we're looking at more of a September timeframe now. Once you hit the summer, probably not going to be the best time for that. We're going to want to get peak engagement from everybody. But we committed. I was at the meeting that it sort of really sort of came to a head, and one of the biggest pieces of that was that from you could date all the way back to the beginning to now, a lot of misinformation and not necessarily sort of not buy-in and not necessarily using facts on all the different pieces. Also sort of, we're going to start with phase one, but you know, and then do phase two later, but phase two required an easement that requires the property owner. And okay, well, this is going to provide this much relief from a flooding perspective, but nobody could back that up with numbers. So one of the things that I've asked, and we committed specifically, is when we come back, it's going to be a plan that really focuses on, you know, being able to come in one shot and do this, that would have the buy-in potential for the easement. That was a crucial piece for this. So that's one of the neighbors who, you know, who has a very firm understanding of the impact and nature and all that, who I have at least continued to periodically update when I've seen that individual in town, at least to say, please pass that along, that we are working on this. You know, so I think we're looking at a much different process. The town's not looking to come in here and just ram this down as the only way. There are also multiple steps that probably could have been taken from the beginning. And as simple as going sort of horizontally with your approach instead of vertically, which lands essentially in somebody's backyard and a bunch of trees need to be taken down. That has an impact because they were going to do some staging areas and things like that. And, you know, they wanted, but there are alternatives. So the easy route versus the maybe a little bit more steps, but get you to the better end result is what we're looking for now, realizing that. We don't do it with the easement, it's going to be a problem. So we've got a neighbor that, you know, that's right there that we need to be very respectful for. And then there were the tree concerns and some of the other things. Does that sort of answer? I mean, we're not looking to do what they were teed up for before.
Definitely more helpful. I'm a little bit confused by the process, I guess. And I guess I would just follow up and say, like, what happens if we vote yes and you move forward, and then once the plans actually come out, the neighborhood freaks out and
Well-
is like, this is not good for us.
So this piece is the trails piece. There's already funding in place, and the bulk of the work and the bulk of what the neighborhood had actually had an issue with at the time had nothing to do with the trail piece. The trail piece is, if we're going to come on this site and we're going to deal with all of this drainage and it's in an area that has conservation and wooded area, you may be able to put as I understand it, you know, essentially a small trail area. So at least it makes it accessible, and there's a lot of, you know, potential and you know, and nature in there. So those are the types of things that Tim Bishop looks for. And there was some funding available to make this a possibility. And that's what this piece is. You don't really necessarily get to this other piece, certainly not in the form that we've been looking to do. The crux of the project and the sort of issues that the neighborhood had was largely centered on the detention ponds and the fact that in order to do that, they were gonna go in and it's disruptive to the site. It's gonna take a lot of different things, you know, I'm not gonna not take trees down under a new plan, but it's gonna take a lot of trees and it was gonna cause, it was gonna come very close to property lines and some other things like that. So our priority on the site is the trail piece is secondary to that. We want to get the first piece, which has a flood mitigation component, and get that and done in a more respectful manner to the neighborhood, and then the trails piece second. If you're going to do all this on this site, Tim had access into a grant that allows it to now open this site up for some light usage, because it could ultimately be a beautiful site in that neighborhood. And the process for that begins and, you know, really probably begins and ends at the neighborhood in all reality. But it begins at the neighborhood most likely in the September timeframe, at the soonest, just with the summer. When we come back and we say, here's what we have right now for an alternative to what you had seen before. And here's what the impacts would be, but also quantifying out what the benefits will be as well for any of the said impacts. So less impact, but also letting them know, because one of the problems was you couldn't even tell them what the benefit was. If you, okay, we're gonna do all this and you know, we couldn't even say you're gonna be improved by your flood by, you know, it's gonna fix it, or it's gonna be this percentage, or, so I've asked, you've gotta quantify when you're gonna go in and do that and make sure people understand the benefit side too, if that makes sense. And, you know, and if I said September, I would just note if it turns into the neighborhood in October, it's probably because we're working with the neighbor that has the easement piece first, because we really want to, you know, try to solve that component. And that's going to require a very respectful approach to the property.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding this item? Representative Colburn.
I do echo Representative Cook-Lemon's concerns. Those are exactly mine as well, that just living in an association and not trying to take my example and say it's everything, but, you know, ours is mostly dormant right now. We don't really have a lot of meetings. There's not a lot of involvement and engagement from, we're about a 50-person or 50 household association. From what I heard from Representative Garskoff, they're about similar. And I know if this happened in our neighborhood, the awareness would be really low. So one of my questions is, do we have a gauge on what the awareness is of the homeowners in terms of actually knowing that the town owns property in the association now? So I'd be interested in that. But to go off what I was just saying is that if this happened in my neighborhood, I know people wouldn't be aware of it. Then the plans would come out and they would flip a you-know-what. So those are and then it turns into, well, the association is here because it's supposed to protect my private property, and the association isn't doing its job now. So I'm going to file a lawsuit either against the association itself, which we have had, or against the town. So that's my concern. So I'd like to know what, if we have a gauge on awareness of actual property ownership by the town. And then two, I was trying to find them because these are special taxing districts, they are subject to FOI. I was trying to find if there's any minutes, which I know my association would not have that, if there are minutes online. But if we have access, it sounds like we're talking to the chairman or the president of the association. If he has access to minutes that he's able to share from, I don't know, the past year of meetings, they probably only had 1 or 2 meetings, I'm assuming, or maybe Josh, Representative Garskoff has them as well. That would be helpful, I think, too.
So I can't speak for the association component. I know that the town attorney obviously had referenced that he has been in contact with them. But so I don't know necessarily how many people within the association are aware. We can certainly reach out when it comes time to get to the fall to make sure that they're aware that this is occurring, and we're looking for an open process with it. I just want to again sort of caution though that there's 2 components here. So there's the trail piece, and then there's also the bulk of the work that's going to get done. But it is largely, you know, it is members of the association and areas either bordering, you know, or a close proximity that have also been, you know, up in arms related to flood issues. So the detention pond component is specifically to try to, the bulk of the work for this, you know, that is not part, that has nothing to do with this. It's already been set in motion, at least, you know, as a project. literally to the point that it was almost starting, and it frankly, it stopped, at a higher level within the administration to put things that were put in place largely before we were even here, in the way it dates back to say, wait a minute, like you can't, after coming to a meeting in this very room where the neighborhood, I mean, I don't know, 30, 40 people who were up in arms and going, this, enough is enough. And, to stop that and say, you have to come up with, we as a town collectively need to come up with a better path forward that has buy-in for that, which is exactly what we're trying to do right now. It's in motion. It's completely revamping the way that entire project was going to go, to the point of, looking at, I'll get, and I'm more than happy offline to also, if you want to, because I don't know how many people want to sit here and talk about that, but it went to, we were going to go vertically and be right in somebody's backyard. We can go horizontally, but then there's questions about, well, how do we move the site, on and, material on and off? And, and we're down to, okay, well, what if we did this? Well, that might take a tree down. Okay, well, what if we did it this way? What if it costs a little bit more, but it's not outrageous, but we move things to a secondary location? I mean, that's where we're at, to try to be as respectful to the site as possible. And, we want awareness, we want buy-in. I mean, you're not going to make everybody on every single thing happy, because the alternative is we pull the whole thing, and we end up with a flood issue, or we don't do enough of it, and then we end up spending a bunch of money and find out that we still have a flood issue. That's a problem too. And on like a per capita, it's already at a very high dollar amount compared to like what a normal, like a lot of people in a lot of places would take that money on a per capita, but because it's tied to the whole Rooster River and that entire project, it's part of a bigger project. So it makes sense to do this while while we're there, get everything that we can possibly do right. The trail piece then being sort of that secondary one. And I know there are some that are not necessarily, they don't even fully understand what it means to put this there. So I think there's some apprehension to just exist, like, 1 million people are going to show up in the trail. I'm not sure that that's, necessarily what actually is going to happen. And I think what we're trying to do is come up with a design that does the detention piece, and then layers the updates of the trail around it, and then shows to everybody in the area that this would actually be a way to take a nice, wooded site, keep it as wooded as possible, but then give a little bit of access to it. For the enjoyment of, primarily it's going to be the people that are there, as in other places they can walk. And the less we disrupt the site with the detention ponds and all that, the more of this is more beautiful it's going to be for the long run.
Right. I guess the sticking point for me is that the detention center is impactful in terms of it improves my, if I'm a property owner, it improves my property, right? I no longer have flooding. I don't have sewer issues. The greenway space is a little bit different in the sense that it could be seen as invading on my property or on my neighbor's property or our association. I think that's where, like, I understand the logic there. But that's why I think this one feels like it could be a little bit more of a third rail than the former.
Fair point. That's philosophical.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Representative Woke.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Jay Walk, District 5. How you doing, David? So am I hearing right that this project, I'm not talking about the trail, I'm talking about the alleviation of the flooding from the Rooster River in their neighborhood. So I was at that town hall meeting. I think you were there. Our late first selectman was there also. I remember, and I know Josh Goskoff was there. So I know what the objections were to stopping this project from stopping the flooding. I mean, I've witnessed, I don't know this, maybe some of my representatives have witnessed some of what this river actually does to people's homes. And Representative Collin, I definitely agree with you. It's definitely an improvement for people's homes. The retention centers, so everybody should know.
Representative Woke, unless you have a question for the administration.
Well, the bottom line is when would this be? When would this be? You're saying September would be the time when this project would be started around?
Well, the project's still gonna be at least a few months after that at the soonest. And when we get into winter months, it may turn into a spring project. Obviously, we had hoped to have done this, you know, sooner, but going back to the drawing board, we're looking at September, October, probably for public meetings at the soonest. That's the timeline for trying to get the neighborhood to, to have buy-in, and you never know if you have some modifications from there.
Thanks, David. Thanks for doing it for all this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Representative McCabe, question?
Quick request through a question. I think if it's possible, it would be great to have maybe just a timeline or some outline of your association engagement plans for the fall so that it's in the record for next week's meeting and we have that under consideration. Would be helpful to me anyway. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Or questions? Seeing none, unfortunately, next week, we will have to make a motion to remove the name William Gerber from this resolution. So we do have to add that, unfortunately, to this, when you're discussing it in committees. Thank you, everyone. We'll move on to the next item. Regarding the donation of a portion of 785 Oldfield Road. Again, Mr. Bishop will be here next week, but we do have Attorney Piers and members of the administration, Mr. Becker and Acting First Selectman Christine Vitale here this week that may be able to answer any questions. Backup for this item is found on pages 31 to 34, and this is agenda item 5. Are there any questions regarding this item? Seeing none, again, we'll have opportunity to have Mr. Bishop speak about that next week. Moving on to the Dwight School resolution. This is agenda item 6 with backup found on pages 35 to 36. Next week, we will have to amend this resolution as the Board of Selectmen amended it and we did not get the amendments on the agenda. The Board of Selectmen removed the word elementary in 4 places. Mr. Papa George, I thought he wasn't going to be here, but then I thought I saw him on. Yes, I thought he wasn't going to be online, but he is online here. He's the Executive Director of Operations for Fairfield Public Schools. And also in person, we have Jeff Peterson, the Chair of the Board of Education here, to provide us some information with this. Mr. Papa George, do you want to give us a little summary? For FairTV, that's Angelus online. You have to be unmuted.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you now. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry for the background noise, but so this is a project, as you all know, we are working towards getting the capital group moving, and we are working towards a solution for the Dwight Elementary School project, one way or the other. Which way it's going to go is what we're still working with the capital group on. But this is a request to create a committee or a work building group so that we can keep the process moving with state reimbursements, and it lines us up for everything we would need to do moving forwards once a final decision comes out from the town and is presented to the Board of Education.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson, do you have anything to add?
I'll just say that this originated actually in the Board of Selectmen. This is something we've been talking about in this capital projects work group for some time, because obviously ultimately the reimbursement issue is going to be critical and time sensitive. But one of the other things that this will do will be to enable the discussion to start taking place in public, and to have official meetings with agendas and minutes, and public comment, which I know the Dwight community in particular has been very hungry for. So this is a solution to that problem as well as we go through and decide what shape this project will ultimately take.
Thank you. Are there any questions regarding the Dwight School resolution? Representative McCloat.
Megan McCloud, District 2. This question is for you, Mr. Peterson or Mr. Papa George. Just for the public edification and certainly the information for those in this room, is there any background anybody wants to share as to why we were removing the term elementary from the project? Were there discussions that perhaps members of the public may not be aware of that you have the opportunity to talk about
I
now?
think Ms. Vitale actually is here and might be best to answer that question
Perfect.
since it was the Board of Selectmen that
Perfect.
voted on that. Welcome,
you.
Ms. Acting First Selectman, Ms. Vitale. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Do I have to push? No. Oh, it's not. It's nice. We removed the word elementary school at the Board of Selectmen level in part due to some public comment from members of the Board of Education. The Board of Education, when discussing this project last year, the plans included ECC classrooms, the Early Childhood Center, and we just wanted to leave the door open by removing elementary school because there might be children that are younger than elementary school aged.
If you want to think about it as projects that are taking place on the Dwight campus, it's more what the intention was.
I think both of you just need to speak into the mic because the people online may or may not be able to hear you. I'm not sure.
It was really more semantics just to take the word elementary school out because the Board of Education, while it has acted, the capital working group is still looking at various plans for that site. Once those plans come back, my understanding is that it'll go back to the Board of Education for review, and then we'll move forward on what that plan looks like in terms of getting funding. The initial discussions included, as I mentioned, early childhood classrooms, where the district is in need of additional space for our earliest learners, and Dwight was identifies it as a site that might be able to house those students, but we won't know yet. So just to leave the door open for early learners there, we took out the word elementary just to avoid confusion. As Mr. Peterson said, we're just looking at it at the Dwight campus.
I mean, I'll also just add that the charge itself to the building committee incorporates a statement that amendments may be made to it at a future time. So as the project comes into clearer focus, it may be just an elementary school, it may be elementary school plus ECC. We'll have a better idea and may be able to amend the charge later on to reflect what's on the ground.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions regarding this item? Representative Pistilli.
Sharon Pistilli, District 5. I have a question regarding like the timing of both the formation and the action of this committee. Like, are we concerned with the trickle down of the federal like defunding of education trickling down to the state defunding of education to perhaps not be at a reimbursement level that we wish to? Like, do we have to, speed up our plans because of unknown financial conditions?
I'll take a stab. It's a big unknown. Right, right now, reimbursement comes through the state, so that's where our focus is. I mean, obviously, there are some things right now that the federal government has put on hold that may or may not impact our town. None of that is related to building projects at this point. I don't believe anything at the state level related to building projects is on the hook either. Obviously, there's known unknowns and there's unknown unknowns. We can't plan for every contingency. But right now we're just, we have been in our discussions and in the working group, assuming that reimbursements will continue to take place.
So we'll put it in the unknown category. Yeah, thank you.
Unknown. Can I just jump on there and say that, as you all know too, the state just passed some new legislation for Connecticut state projects for school buildings. So this doesn't really move us ahead or backwards. It just kind of keeps us in line with where we normally would be for a school reimbursement project by moving this forwards at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Papa George. Are there any other questions regarding this item? Representative Shea.
Hi, Representative Shea, District 2. In the resolution, it used the word new Timothy Dwight Elementary School project. Is this a foregone conclusion? Is this going to be a new building, or is there still talk about a renovation?
I think the word new is just because it's going to be a new building committee for the town. A decision hasn't been made by the Board of Selectmen. Board of Education last year asked other town boards for seed money to explore this. The first selectman did not, to explore a new build. The first selectman did not move that forward, decided to go in a different direction of getting the working group and a school feasibility study. So I think that right now, we want to get the result back from Spigals, the architect and construction manager who is looking at the feasibility study. That's due back in August. And then it'll go back to the Board of Education for review and come before the town board. So no, to answer your question right now, no decision has been made about whether it's going to be a renovate like new or a new build, but I'm going to defer to Mr. Peterson because I have not been in those working group meetings. Mr. Peterson, as chair of the Board of Education, has been included, and Mr. Papa George. So I will defer to them.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you quite like that, but you understand why I did that. The Board of Ed back last year did make a request to the town for a new build at Dwight. And as Ms. Vitale said, like that was not taken forward to other boards. Currently, from the Board of Ed standpoint, that our request stands. However, understanding that this working group is going to come in soon, sometime next month, with a report on feasibility and potential costs and other draft documents, we will have the discussion whether our request for a new build is still valid. But ultimately, we are not a funding authority of our own. We are, rely on the goodwill of other bodies in town. So that discussion will continue in light of all the facts, both our current request and whatever we get from this working group report next month.
And you expect that working group report would be public information, maybe to be brought before this body?
I think to begin, it'll be the Board of Selectmen has been receiving updates on this working group. I think the public reporting would begin with the Board of Selectmen. In speaking with Mr. Peterson, I would assume it would also go before the Board of Education. I will defer to the moderator for setting the agenda for the RTM. Once we get it back, we can maybe even have a townwide, presentation so the consultants aren't presenting it multiple times. It would go to the building committee for review as well as they begin their work. The first step is, of course, getting approval by this body before we can even staff a building committee.
I guess I'm just not clear what you're asking us to approve, because there's been a whole bunch of information in the past that I've seen about renovating or expanding or demolishing and building perhaps in a new location, maybe in the athletic fields, or tearing down the existing building and building there. And this seems like there's a lot of information that's left unknown right now. And I don't know that a building committee is the right place to resolve that. It would seem that it would be with a group of experts that maybe are preparing a report that we should have an opportunity to see before we charge, head first into a new building project that may or may not be prudent.
Well, this is somewhat taking a new approach to this building project with Capital Projects Working Group. There's no funding available right now. So the next step would be, once we get the report back from the working group and the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen review it, the next step would be a funding request to move this project forward. And I think that's where we'll be having a better idea of what the school is going to look like and what the financial impact will be for the town. These, as Mr. Papa George's request was made to the Board of Selectmen by the Board of Education, as Mr. Papa George reported, they need to be done in order to kind of get on the list for state funding. Being that we did not move it forward last spring, this is just laying the groundwork. So when we get the report back, the Board of Education reviews, the Board of Selectmen reviews, we can move the project forward as it historically has been in the past, which would be for a funding request for a project. You approve a building committee, there's a lot of steps that still have to come into play before people are actually seated on it. Approval process through the RTM, we would then put it in the town newsletter, asking for volunteers to serve. Once the Office of the First Selectman reviews those names, we would put names forward to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen would then need to approve those names. So it's going to be a while before this committee is up and running. And concurrently, we know based on this Capital Projects Working Group, they're expecting to have information back to us in August. So by September, October, I think we'll have more information to bring before all town bodies.
Thank you. Representative Carroll?
Sure.
I have a couple questions, and some of it is, I went to a small school, so sometimes I don't follow this. The working group and the building committee, could you explain the difference, or is that the same thing?
So the working group is more of an ad hoc group. It comprises members of town hall administration, as well as people from the Board of Ed side, including Mr. Papa George, the superintendent, and myself. So we've been having conversations with the consultants, Vigals and Partners, that was selected through an RFP process in January, pursuant to the First Selectman's request. So this group has been interfacing with the consultant about a number of scenarios. I think there's 13 scenarios that the RFP asked them to evaluate for cost and feasibility and broadening ideas. But this working group, does not have any authority to advance a project. And in order to do that, we need to move to the next step of formality, which is what Ms. Vitale was trying to get ahead of, because we know from past experience, it can take several months, hopefully not several months, but a long time to get this up and running. And if we don't start now, we don't want to be behind the 8 ball when it's time to start preparing things for ultimately state reimbursement consideration.
Okay, so that answers my concern, that you made it clear that the Board of Education wants a new building. They made that decision, let me finish. They made that decision before they get any analysis back. We want a new building, something in the neighborhood of $62 million, if I recall, and if I may. That is the same group who is interfacing, and I suspect signing the checks for this group doing the analysis. So they're being directed by a group of people, just the perception I have here, they're directed by a group of people who want, their decision would be, before we had this work done, to build a new building. They're directing the group doing the analysis. I'm guessing they might come back with a skew to go ahead and build a new building. What confidence can you give us that that's not going to happen?
There are a couple of things to unpack there. First, the Board of Ed did vote in favor of a new build at the Dwight site, not based on no analysis. We actually had a facilities committee that was examining this on their own for some time. We made the request to the town because we can't fund it ourselves. We're not our own funding authority. This is something that would be done through town bonding. So the discussion that we began having with the town at that time was, how do we advance this request through other town bodies? Now, the Board of Ed in the past has made other requests that other town bodies have whittled down. The thing that I keep coming back to is the Mill Hill Elementary School. We, as a Board of 9, voted 9-0 in favor of a 504 capacity expansion of Mill Hill from what it was 378. But the town ultimately agreed to only fund 441 kid square footage of an expansion. So in that case, even though we pushed pretty aggressively for it, we worked with what the town agreed to give us, and so that's how the project went about. We had our thumb on that scale as much as we could, as consistent with our powers under the charter. Now, I will say with the working group, working group was not a request of the Board of Ed. It was a request of the first selectman and the Board of Selectmen. We participate in that. And I think the Board of Ed's participation in that is critical because we are interested in the educational aspects of the building, not necessarily the cost, although of course that factors in. But we want to advance our request for what we believe is in the best educational interest of the kids of this town. But we do realize at the same time that we live in the real world and that other groups are kind of in control of writing the checks. And so in that sense, I don't know. I mean, I would be concerned if the Board of Ed was not involved in the process with the working group, but we are not the ones ultimately making a decision. The Board of Selectmen hired the consultants, Vigals and Partners, that we've been participating in meetings, been answering questions and providing them information, which has been very important. But we will get the same report that everyone else gets. So
Yeah,
we're not,
no, and I appreciate that and I understand that, but and we would want the Board of Education and particularly the superintendent, Mr. Papa George, involved in it. They have the expertise, but you'd also want people who have, I don't think there's anybody outside of the town administration and the Board of Ed on this working group. Nobody representing the RTM or other bodies that represent the taxpayers. I remember when this first came up, the superintendent made it clear we want a new build. In fact, we don't even know what a remodel would cost. So that was a real concern for us, and I think that was a problem. I think my next question is for Ms. Vitale. I think we've had a lot of conversation about the project management structure that the town has put in place. Who, from best I've heard, has really done a good job so far of saving money, moving projects along. Would they be involved in this working group since it is all part of the town?
Well, the project management team is heavily involved in this working group right now. They are the driving force of the working group that's being done right now. The building committee is a little bit different. That would be residents that would be serving on it, so the taxpayer is represented. State statute requires someone with construction background and also requires the chair of the Board of Education, which is in part why I made the request to the first selectman that Mr. Peterson or his designee be involved in the school feasibility working group. So there'd be a continuity of information and knowledge from the very beginning of this process to when it moves to be an official school building project that would have to go before this board for approval for funding, would then need to go before the state in order to get on a priority list for state reimbursement. And that is the piece that we are doing right now. We're not approving what the school project's going to look like. We are just setting the groundwork to create the building committee, enable the town to apply to the state for funding. The educational specifications that the Board of Ed has approved, that's going to be guiding this project. We foresee the town's capital project group being an active participant and a resource for any school building committee. You know, this is new, so we're still working that out. But past building committees would hire a construction manager, would hire an owner's rep. There's additional funding for those resources. And I think that part of the reason why First Selectman and his team move forward with this capital projects working group is just to build capacity in-house, so maybe we wouldn't have to necessarily subcontract out that. Part of the charge for the school building committee would be to look at the work that has already been done, look at the educational specifications. I would expect typically there is a representative of the school district on school building committees, as well as a representative from the town administration. That's the role that I foresee the capital projects working group liaison filling that role. And I'm just going to defer to, Mr. Becker is here and he's also been heavily involved in this as the chief operating officer. So please, if I'm leaving anything out and is involved in the planning of this, but also through the moderator, if it'd be all right for Mr. Becker to lend, if
Yes,
there's
thank you,
anything
Ms.
else, no pressure, but I just want to also if I'm leaving out anything, because I've only been in this role.
Understand,
for-
but Mr.
for a
Becker, do
few
you have
weeks.
any additions? Oh, he's saying you've
And-
covered it well.
And Madam Moderator, they've answered the questions and I think I've addressed my concern.
Thank you.
And so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Are there any other questions regarding this item? Representative McClough. Oh, wait, 1 second. Did you say Zizma? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna Representative McClough, you already asked, so I'm gonna go to Mike, Representative Hardigan first.
Mike Hardigan, District 3. Thank you, Madam Moderator. General question about, as we're establishing the building committee, one of the things we've seen is having to reach outside of our own resources for expertise on environmental situations. Will there be some consideration going into this to have someone on this building committee who can take a look at the overall project ahead of time and say, oh, by the way, this is where the state requirements for groundwater, for soil vapor, for building materials, will we have somebody that's definitely homegrown advocating for us on the committee?
Well, I think that our staff, Mr. Papa George and the representative from the Capital Workings Group would be a resource. I can't say who would be volunteering and just in terms of members of the public, but in looking at candidates, we'd be looking to staff this building committee with diverse, I mentioned construction, but I would think that you would also want someone with an environmental background. You would want somebody with a financial background just to kind of manage the budget. You would want somebody tied into the school district. The school principal usually is a liaison, not a voting member, an architectural, someone with architectural background. Am I leaving anything out? Mr. Papa George, this is not, I feel like I'm presenting this and I want to defer to the Board of Ed and to the school administration for.
Mr. Papa George, do you have anything to add?
Yes. So I apologize for rough where I am, but just to give you an idea, we also have we work with, I should say, Synergistics, who that type of energy management would be right up their alley as part of our contract with them. They would provide not oversight, but liaison and be able to lead the group as well from an energy management side. And as you mentioned, groundwater, that's all required by state statute that we have it evaluated by a third party representative to make sure we are not breaking any rules or regulations when it comes to groundwater and control. And so we do work closely with our architects and our engineers on that as well.
Understood that we've been reaching out to professionals as needed for the environmental stuff. But I think what we've seen is that a heads up might be helpful. So what I'm really asking is, will that be a consideration when we're building this committee, that somebody on the committee will have some knowledge themselves of how the DEEP handles projects like this? Anybody who's been involved in site remediation, in removal of environmental materials from demolition of a building, anything like that, that's actually somebody on the committee and not a hired LEP.
No, I would absolutely recommend that. As Ms. Vitale said, the group would be established from the first selectman's office. So they would put out a call for anyone that was looking to volunteer and become a member of this group. And her office would review the applicants, and we would be willing to help out with that process to get a well-rounded group as a building committee.
Thanks.
Yeah, and if anybody has any recommendations, send them our way.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things to remember, and I've been through a couple of cycles of this now. Fairfield is deep in talent of parents who have parents or not, or grandparents or whoever who have very impressive resumes that have a lot to bring to the table in a lot of these committees. So we've been fortunate in the past in staffing this. It's important to get the word out and let people know that this is an opportunity. If this, if they have some skill that they want to bring, for the professional skill to bear on it. But we've been very fortunate in this town to find people with real deep resumes when it comes to these building projects.
Thank you. Anyone who hasn't asked a initial question? Representative McClure.
Megan McCloud, District 2. Thanks for being here tonight. So it seemed a little confusing to me that we weren't approving any funding in initial to this discussion. And I understand from my colleagues who were here before I was that apparently there was an exploratory fund that was approved. I understand about $100,000 that was supposed to explore the options of a rebuild versus a brand new construction. So I guess my question for Mr. Papa George would be, where are we at with those funds, or Mr. Peterson and Selectwoman Vitale, if anybody has an update on that? And secondary to that, you know, the third part of this proposed resolution includes authorizing at least the preparation of schematic drawings and outline specifications for the Dwight School project. Who are we authorizing to do that? Is that a bid process? Do we have any idea what the cost of that is going to be? I know when I've had to hire architects for different things, those are expensive propositions. So if you could answer both of those, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Angels, did you have any insight into the?
If you like, I can jump in.
Go ahead.
Yep, I can tell you that the approval was a $1 million funding, which is what is being handled and by the working group, and what is they use that to hire Spigals to do this work that they keep talking about as the report coming out in August. As for the architect engineers for a building committee by state statute for reimbursement, they will have to go out to an official bid process.
And just to be clear, this state legislation about school building committees says explicitly that you have to request at least schematic design. So that's a legislative requirement in the building committee charge.
Yes.
Do we have any idea what the cost of that is, though?
At this time, I would say we don't, only because it's usually based on a percentage of the project. And since there's no overall project at this point, other than we're trying to get in line for a project, then we don't know. Once the report from Spigals come out, that would give us a better idea, and it would lock in numbers that we would be, the building committee would be coming before you guys for seed money to make that process happen.
And when the Board of Ed requested seed money for this in fall 2024, we requested, I believe, 6% of what we believed at that time was to be a reasonable estimate of the amount. The seed money we requested was about $3.4 million for that first round of work. I will say that some of the $1 million that we've put through the working group has resulted in things that I think a building committee would have done anyway. For example, there's been borings done up at the Dwight site to make sure that we know, to know better where we can build. Traffic studies have been done. Things of that nature that will be transferable to a building committee. So even though we have already spent some money, I think all the work is going to get used.
So just as a follow-up, based on what you said, it just seems to me somewhat premature that we don't have the report that's coming out, I guess, in about a month in August. So we don't actually know what we're going to need to bid for, because we don't know if it's going to be a rebuild or a new construction, because we're still waiting on the results of that report. So I guess my question, right, is that typical? That we would typically propose a resolution like this prior to actually knowing what the plan's going to be?
The short answer is that it's not typical. We're doing this in a different way this time. And one of the reasons, not to speak for Selectman Gerber, but that I think he was interested in doing it this way, was that we have a lot of interlocking projects. Not just Board of Ed projects, but also thinking about what to do about the senior center and the health department. You know, and so the thought was to try to put all of these things together that may have areas where they work together. So do we put the ECC at Dwight, or do we put 5 classrooms elsewhere? And how does that all work together, and how does that impact the Dwight site? So, but I guess the fundamental point that I would make is that some project is going to happen one way or another. Dwight needs to be at least renovated, and the renovation types that are being considered by the working group are a renovate is new, back to the cinder blocks, all new ventilation systems and the like. So some large project, some multi-million-dollar project is going to take place out of this. It's not a certainty. We still need the funding, but like that's the direction that we've been going. We just don't know the final shape of that project yet. So at some point there will need to be a building committee. And the thought was, well, I speak for Christine, but like this thought was just, let's start this now, expand as need be, focus in as need be, but get the ball rolling on this because it will be needed.
And also, it will be needed, and again, this request was made by the school district to move this forward, so they are ready to act once we get the information back from the working group, also in preparation for the capital planning workshop, that the working group is going to be giving a report. It's not just Dwight, they were looking at Jennings, they were looking at the Giant Steps property. So that information, Dwight was part of it, and they were going to review many different scenarios of what could happen just at Dwight, but this was to really give us a comprehensive look at multiple sites, as Mr. Peterson said, to better inform all town boards in our capital planning. And depending on, what the cost ends up being, that could affect other things on the Board of Ed's waterfall as well, and the timing of things. So more information, the better. And that is why I think all town boards approved the funding for that $1 million last year, because everybody didn't want to necessarily move forward with 3.4 for a new build until we just got more data, which is, we're now coming to the end of that process, as Mr. Peterson said. And now I think everybody knows that something needs to be done at Dwight. Hopefully we'll have a better answer to what exactly that will be by September, when we're all going to be sitting down again to talk about our 10-year capital plan. I absolutely 100%, acknowledge that this is a little bit out of order from what has been done in the past, but we're just trying to lay the groundwork for when we're ready to go. We're ready to go at the state level, the school district can go, get us on priority lists and maximize whatever state funding might be available. Because I think that's the goal for all of us, is to address the needs of our school district, and also relieve, whatever tax burden we can on our local property owners. So maximizing the state reimbursement, I would hope would be a goal of everybody.
Thank you, Representative Wolk.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Jay Walk.
Can I just,
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Papa George.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to point out that, as Ms. Vitale said, this is kind of out of the ordinary. However, our concern and the reason we brought this forwards was when we do go to the state and we are ready for a project, one of the questions that we're going to get asked at the table from the state is, when did the building committee get involved? And we wanted to be able to be transparent and say, we got them involved as soon as we were getting ready to get reports back. They've been involved from the beginning. We wouldn't want the state to come back and say, well, you didn't involve a building committee, which is required, so they're not going to recognize the work that we've already done. We want to be in line, and we want to be able to answer and be transparent to the state when it comes time for reimbursement projects consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Papa George. Representative Wolk.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I have a question. Back when Stratfield School was being renovated, I remember going to all the meetings, and since we're talking about putting committee meetings together for this project, I remember when, on the stage, there was not only the building committee that was up on the stage, there was a building facilities committee that was on that they were overseeing the building committees. Does somebody remember that, Mr. Papa George? Maybe you remember? I mean, did that committee just get disbanded? That's just my question.
Representative Wolk, I think that's a totally different, the buildings facility didn't have to do with the Board of Ed buildings. It had to do with other buildings within town.
They were part of Stratfield School's renovation.
I know that it's not a current committee at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Representative Waldron.
Cindy Waldron, District 3. You could tell I don't ask a lot of questions. So am I understanding correctly that this new, I don't want to say new, but your different approach is also trying to build in some efficiencies across kind of all possible avenues of what we're going to face down the road with potential ECC locations and whatnot, but also to get ahead to be able to move this along a little bit quicker. And also, was this not something that constituents, specifically Dwight parents, were really, concerned about and wanted to have this process moved along to the best of our town's ability?
I think the Dwight parents probably would have preferred that we had stuck to the traditional method of just using the seed money and having a school building committee look at that project. I think that when it came down to discussing it from a townwide 10-year capital planning perspective, it was valuable. And as all the town boards approved that 1 million for the school feasibility to get a better idea of our needs across the district for our facilities and also into the future. Growing the capacity, the project management capacity within the town, I think is important and will be a resource to save us money and also hopefully develop a better end product. People are going to be invested in these projects. They're going to be looking for quality control. They're going to be looking to save money. They're not going to be quick to just change orders because it's expedient. So the hope, this is new. So we're all waiting to see how it plays out. And this school feasibility study is a big first initiative, and I can defer to Mr. Becker to speak to his project management team in terms of other savings. But for this, I just want to stick to the agenda items right now, which is really for this body to, not to moderate your meeting at all, but just
Well, thank you.
is to just really focus on getting the approval to form a building committee to go out to the public to look that expertise of our residents, get this feasibility study back, give them the reports, let the Board of Ed do their diligence and come back to the Board of Selectmen with just more information.
Okay, thank you.
And I
And
appreciate.
different is and new isn't necessarily bad. It could be a wonderful new approach to things.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate that for Selectman, acting for Selectman Vitale. I just want to remind everyone too that we are just approving the committee formation. We will see when they do make appointments to the committee, they will be back before us and we do appoint the committee members and approve that. And any funding that happens for this project will also be before us. So this is just the beginning of it all. So Representative Steele.
Thanks, Jeff Steele, District 3. Just two quick questions. One is, it does say, and Jeff, you mentioned that this is part of the language that's normally used for the state, or the authorizing the drawings.
Schematic design.
But it said at least. Is that also part of the normal language where it says authorizing at least that, if not more?
I believe so. Angeles, do you have a better view on that?
It is. That absolutely is. It's the first step. And it's the first step to getting better numbers before the committee can come before you all for a full project cost.
Okay. And my other question is just a follow-up to what others have mentioned tonight. And I've been on this body for a long time. I haven't seen it this way, as you've mentioned. What is the risk to simply doing it the way we've been doing it with all the projects that the town has approved, school and otherwise, for the last 20 years? I mean, what is the real risk to doing it the way we know to do it in the way that's efficient and strategic?
I think there's just been some concerns with initial funding for projects. You think it's going to cost something, and then it comes back once it goes out to bid, and the project starts. That very often, the administration or the school district has to come back for additional funding. So by doing more of the work up front, we're trying to have a better idea of what the number is for all town boards to approve, and went back to the capital planning. So when we're planning those projects, we have hopefully more solid numbers. You've been on this body for a long time. I think that you probably can think of some projects that started out as 2 million. At the end of it, it's doubled. So this is just an approach that will hopefully remedy some of that by having a stronger data going into it. Can't make any promises, but that was the intent of taking the approach we're now taking.
And I'll just add to that, we're kind of sliding back into the way we used to do things now by establishing a building committee. We took this intervening step with the working group to try to get some better numbers, to try to, because there's a lot going on. The town has a lot going on outside of school buildings too. So figuring out how everything is going to fit together was very important. But now we're at the point where we're gonna get that data. And so if you think about it, we're about to stick the old process on top of the new process and go forward in the way that we previously have been by establishing a building committee.
Right, which is usually done after the concept is pretty fleshed out. That's the only thing.
I
We're-
understand, but
we're
we are-
approving a building committee before we know what we're doing, and maybe we don't even do anything.
I would
I'm
hope
saying it's
that
a hypothetical,
I would hope that we don't do nothing.
I
But
understand.
I understand your point. And again, like as I've said earlier, we're not in charge of our own funding on the Board of Ed. All we can do is make the request. But all that said, I think that the expectation, the very large likelihood is that some large construction project is going to start taking place. And we just want to get ahead of that. We want to make sure we have all of our ducks in a row. And when it comes time to ask the state for a reimbursement, that we are ready to go.
Thank you. Representative Blanchard.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Rob, Blanchard, District 6. I know this authorizes the formation of a building committee and for the BOE to start engaging with DAS, which I fully support. But has the town started engaging with DAS officials or on the grant process? Because they do resources that might help to save some money or some best practices that could help us get on the radar and get in the queue so that we be more expedient in getting those grant funding. And it's if
I think that's more a question for Angelus if you have any insight.
and even informally, I mean, I know this is more formal, but
Mr. Papa George is muted.
I can just say that our facilities committee, the central office staff, Mr. Papa George have been in contact with our legislative delegation, have been paying attention to legislation that's gone. Like I think everyone is paying very careful attention to sources of funding, and let's go for it. Okay. No. So I think that is something that is on everyone's mind. We obviously on the Board of Ed want to build what's appropriate for educational purposes, but we want to do it in a financially responsible way that in good partnership with the town, and making sure that we get our maximum reimbursement for what we want to build is part and parcel of that.
Informally have been having conversations with our state delegation on this, just to give them updates where we are for this project. I know it's a priority for them. As part of the RFP went out for the school feasibility study, part of their charge was also to look at ways of maximizing grant funding and state funding. So I would assume that my expectation is that we'd have some guidance on that, especially when looking at various sites which some sites may be more attractive to the state in terms of funding reimbursement. Certain scenarios might be more attractive to the state in terms of, reimbursement rates, what the programming looks like, an elementary school that has early childhood connected to it, an elementary school that has specialized special education services connected to it as part of that plan might end up with a greater reimbursement. So that is something that, the Capital Projects Working Group is doing, looking at the different buildings itself, the traffic studies, the groundwater. It's going to go back to the Board of Education ultimately they decide where kids are going to go and where the programming is for the board. And as Mr. Peterson said, I do know, having served on the Board of Education, that these conversations are not new, and knowing my fellow colleagues and speaking to the superintendent, who also has relationships at the state, is trying to get as much information as we can to both further the Board of Education is responsible, reports to the State Department of Education. So furthering the mission of the state while also being as conscious of the costs for these projects to our local taxpayers. So trying to find that balance is where we are right now. And we're just asking for your support in laying the groundwork to be able to put us in the best position to move this project forward sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Are there any other questions about forming the committee? All right, thank you, everyone, Mr. Papa George, Mr. Peterson, and Acting First Selectman Vitale.
Thank you for the questions.
We'll move on to early voting and same-day voting locations. This is agenda item 8 and can be found in our backup. So our presentation order is different and we put, but I will after, so our presentation order, we unfortunately moved your item to the end, but I will put them before rules to regulate. But since, yeah, so I will put them before rules to regulate, but I'm sorry, Representative McCabe. Moving on to early voting and same-day voting locations. This is agenda item 8 and can be found in our backup on pages 39 to 70, with additional backup also found when clicking more. I did the more link, it was not working this afternoon, so I did forward you that information, RTM members. We have registrars of voters Kathy Politti and Matthew Wagner present to give us information on this agenda item and answer questions. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm not sure which one of you would like to start.
Do we press the button here? Or does it on?
I've heard that it's actually loud enough for people to hear you. If you don't have to press the button and just lean in a little bit.
Okay, great. Thank you for having us this evening. The proposal you have before you is related to the legislature's general shift towards having town legislative bodies approve certain elements of the election process. So the due date for these is actually in August, but just before your August meeting. So we're asking for this to be considered this month. The first is a consideration of the number of early voting locations. We did 2 last year, worked very well. We actually exceeded our turnout expectations pretty substantially. At about the exact number is in the backup, but it was over 17,000 people total came out, which is great. This year, unfortunately, both of the locations that we did use last year are no longer available to us. So I think the goal that we'd like to reach is to be able to have locations that people can consistently rely on, that like your polling places, that you know that these are the places that you will be able to go to for all elections to be able to do early voting. So we're sort of searching for those spots that will be able to sort of be that consistent resource for people in the town. I think the overall expectation is that we'd see a turnout of about half of what we saw last year. Presidential elections and municipal non-first selectman year elections. That's about the proportion that we've experienced historically. You know, I think that we would expect a volume of about 8,000 all told for this election. The second portion of the proposal is related to the number of same-day registration locations. Now, this is a term that encompasses any voter registration that happens in the 2 weeks prior to the election, as well as registration that happens on the day of the election itself. There's a process that has been in place since 2013 for election day registration, was what it was previously called, where people can come and register on election day. Now, during the early voting period, those who wish to register, who are not already registered, cannot register to vote online, and they cannot register to vote by mail. They must come in person during that time. So the process has sort of been expanded and shaped a little bit to sort of fit within both early voting and have a separate process that's a little bit distinct on election day itself. We typically will do one location. That's been our historical norm. And that was actually a requirement up until 2020. And in 2020, they changed the law to allow towns to have as many as they would like. Essentially, you need to submit a proposal to the state, but then, then you can have as many as you want to do. In 2020, we used all 10 polling places. It was a presidential election. It was also COVID was sort of very forefront of the mind for people at that point in time. And the rationale was to say, rather than have one giant boiler room where you have like 500 to 1,000 people show up and want to vote and sort of be in a room that may or may not be safe for people is sort of the concern. Let's divide all of this work among the 10 locations so that the number appearing at any one place is actually quite small, right? That if you're expecting that year, because of the number of mail-in ballots, the number was lower for a presidential year than we would typically have. But let's say you were expecting 1,000 people total, then you'd say, well, instead of having 1,000 at one place, you have 100 at each place. And over the course of a 14-hour day, you're talking about, 7 or 8 in each hour. Right. So that's like much more manageable where you're only serving sort of one person at a time, even at our highest volume of participation. So this election year is obviously going to have a lower number than a presidential election year in terms of the number of people doing same-day registration. But the advantages that we found when we did it at the polling locations in 2020 was that it simplified our education efforts to voters, right? So when we send something to people, we don't know, if you've moved, if someone new is living at the house, you registered to vote 5 years ago and then you sold your house, we mail something to you. The new people are getting this information saying, hey, go to this polling place, but if they go to that polling place, they're going to be turned away, right? So because they can't register and vote there. So that allowed us, instead of to say, well, if you're registered, go here. If you're not registered, go there. And here's how you find out if you're registered or not, which is like a whole process for people. We'd say, everyone, if you're getting this piece of mail, go to this location. It's where you vote. It's where everyone in your district votes. And people were able to sort of get that information much more simply. And at the polling place, when we had a problem where someone was not registered, or when we have a problem where someone had recently moved, they were able to handle that there in a way that normally involved our office much more. So it actually not only was a service level improvement for voters, it actually simplified what we did in the office, where we were responding to many fewer calls from the polling places asking for questions about, did this person move? Are they registered? Do they live in another voting district? Because they had the resources to actually do that at the polling places themselves. So this is an interesting year to do it, because the number we expect from past years of off-year municipal campaigns is in the 30 voter range, right? So obviously we could be surprised, right? Maybe there's going to be all of you fine candidates may go out and organize a big surprising number from somewhere or another for us, which would be wonderful if you did. But for an election like this, we would typically expect about 30. We'd be talking about something like 2 or 3 per polling place over the course of the day. And the volume is actually quite minimal. If you're talking about over 14 hours, you're saying, well, you're going to have one person come in every 4 or 5 hours over the course of the day to use this service. So the existing staff we have is able to handle that. We already did this exact deployment in 2020 with the technology, so we're sort of equipped for handling that. I do think it's a service level improvement for people that streamlines our operations in a way that will really help us. And I also would just add that for same day registration, no one ever uses it twice. Right? Once you have registered in a town, you don't need to re-register the next year. So changing a spot doesn't cause a disruption in the way that moving a polling place might for people, right? Because if you're using this service, you're using it because you're not registered in the town and you have never registered or voted in the town previously. So I hope that you will consider this. What will happen is if you submit this resolution to the Secretary of State's office, we will then give to them our plan for how we will implement it. We've had some discussion about that sort of internally. The Secretary of State's office sort of gave some information to us about how they would like to see it done. We did our process in 2020 where they did the work at the polling place. My original suggestion to you was to say that we would collect the forms and do the data entry the next day. Our correspondence with the Secretary of State's office said, you know, we'd really like to see that done there rather than have it be done the next day, which I'm fine with. That was sort of the proposal that we had sort of discussed internally amongst ourselves going back the last couple of elections. You know, I understand it's both Kathy's preference and the Secretary of State's preference that it be done on site at those locations. So that's all I would have to say. I'm sure Kathy has some comments as well. So
Thank you. Just one moment, Ms. Politi. Before it goes on, I just want to speak to the way the resolution's worded. Mr. Wagner submitted his suggestions first, and that's how they're worded as per Mr. Wagner's preference. And Ms. Politi, I'm assuming is going to say differently at this moment. And if we do decide, we can amend it accordingly to what this body feels is the best decision. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Politi.
All right. Thank you all for listening to us. I know this is all really new to you guys. You're not experienced in this, and you're really getting your information.
Ms. Politi, can you speak
hear
a
us?
little closer for some?
You can't hear me? Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I just want to thank you because I know this is a difficult decision for you people because you don't really know the processes, and we're here to like explain that to you. I am in agreement with Matt on the number of early voting locations. I think 2 would be fine because Fairfield University does not have anything on campus available for us. And we were also told we can't use Old Town Hall as an early voting location. Same day registration is available all 14 days of early voting and at 2 locations. Believe that gives ample time for people to register. It's an entirely different process. I heard differently about 2020. I was not a registrar, but I heard it did not go well and people were not trained properly and didn't feel comfortable. Assistant registrars already have many tasks to do, and adding this is not a good idea. The CVRS takes months to become proficient in, and I included Matt's testimony indicating the same, basically. That's in your backup. We run the risk of giving the wrong ballot because you have to have, at each of the polling locations, you will need all 10 districts. So if Fairfield University students go or Sacred Heart University students go, they both are in split districts. So you have to be very careful. Fairfield U is District 7 and 8. Some live off campus in 9 and 10. And Sacred Heart, they have, some is in Bridgeport. So they would get a Bridgeport ballot and have to be sent elsewhere. And the others are in District 2. And per the SDR statute, registrars must train and supervise the SDR locations. I don't see how it would be possible for me to supervise 10 locations at the same time. And the lead attorney for the Secretary of State's office has already told us that she would not recommend approval for 10 locations. That's all.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our registrars? Representative McCabe.
Shell McCabe, District 4. So I understand the process correctly. If you arrive at a polling location, you have not registered to vote, or you thought you did. If it were centrally located where you would then register, can you vote at the place where you then go to same day register, or are you sent back to your polling location in district?
You would, wherever the same day location is, you can vote there, register and vote there, no matter what district you're in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Carson.
Laura Carson, District 4. What did we do last year? Where were the early Same day registration.
Right at town hall and our staff did it. Typically, that's what.
And were you
what's done.
stampeded with 1,000, no, it's present, 1,000, how many, how did that go?
Which year are you talking about?
Last year,
When-
the presidential.
Last year, on election day, I think it was 514.
So if that was only 514 that day, it's gonna be a lot less. What are we talking about, half? Maybe this year?
The last municipal, we had 300.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Any other questions regarding this item? Representative Pistilli.
Last municipal included the first selectman's ballot, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so we don't have any numbers on same day voting and immunity not for selectmen, do we?
I wasn't registered.
The memo I supplied had going back to 2016, so the 2019 data, 2021 and 2017 data was in there. And between 20 and 30 was the number that we saw in each of those years.
20 and 30 people?
Total, yeah.
Total people?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Representative Ludwigsack.
Christine Ludwigsack, District 8. Just so I'm clear on exactly what we're looking to do. So we're thinking there might be 30 people for same day registration, and we're looking to have 10 different locations for that. Am I understanding this?
That's fair. I would say that the idea is to make it so that when people appear at their polling places and they're not registered, that they're able to be handled there rather than being sent to a different location. So the amount of work at each place that each person is doing is going to be pretty minimal. But the idea is, like, I'll just say that when a voter comes in, they go to the table to check in. If they're not on the list, they get sent to our workers that we call assistant registrars. What they will do is go through a sort of a 3-step process where they say, I'm going to see first if that person's on the inactive list, like if they haven't voted in a while and they didn't respond to our mailing to them. If they're not on the inactive list, they look to see if they're in the correct polling place. And if they're in the wrong polling place, they send them to the polling place where they're supposed to be. And then at that point, what we've instructed them to do historically is to then call us in the registrar's office, where we search townwide to see were they registered somewhere else and can be transferred into that polling place, or should they be sent to wherever we're doing same day registration to be able to vote. And, you sometimes do have some people where it's like late enough in the day that they're like, they can't really get to you. I don't think in 2025 that there will be a substantial number sort of in that category, but some people are like, well, I'm at my polling place that's near me, but I can't necessarily get to wherever you're going to be. So that's part of the concern. I'd say also part of it is to say that now, if they do have that resource at the polling place, rather than call us to say, well, let's see if you're registered elsewhere in town, we can do it ourselves. We now have that data at our location that we've historically been blind to, and that a lot of the service calls that we're getting from our polling places routinely are, I sold my house in the Dwight Elementary District and now I'm in the Burr Elementary District. Like I'm now somewhere different, I'm voting somewhere different. We're responding to those calls and contacting the other polling places to make sure they didn't vote. Now they have the ability to find that information themselves, given this, installing this computer sort of at that site for them.
And also just to mention that you do have to make, if they were in another municipality within Connecticut, you do have to make at least, 2 phone calls and spend 5 to 10 minutes to try to make sure they didn't vote in the other municipality before you accept that ballot. And these people are going out to perform curbside voting. They're looking for other voters. We don't really know how many people will show up to do same day registration. But what I find is most people know that they're not registered. And typically they have come to town hall.
And just to circle back, that the 30 people who are looking to do same day registration, is that over the 2-week window, or was that anticipated in 30 people per day?
I think that's Matt's estimate of what he feels will come on election day, right? That's your estimate?
Yeah, so I'd say, based on the 2021 election and the 2017 election where you had municipal with no first selectman, that was what we experienced in those. And, you know, we used sort of the historical data for like our budgeting purposes and planning purposes. You know, obviously we were in the news in 2023 for having a really substantial number of students come out and vote. So something like that is always possible. I sort of reference that, like maybe some of you will have some ideas about like who you're going to get to come out and vote, and maybe you'll organize a group to come to your RTM polling place or whatever, which, you know, certainly if you give us some insight into that, we'll be prepared more effectively for that kind of effort if you put it out. But, you know, that's just historical expectations. So you could say, I'd say 300 was historically quite high for a municipal. 30 is more typical, but, you know, we'll see what the campaign brings.
And we also found that people tend to procrastinate. We thought they would come, you know, during the early voting. Maybe we have to, you know, communicate that more somehow. But, you know, they did mostly show up on election day. So.
Okay, just trying to understand the volume. Thank you, guys.
Sure.
Representative Carroll.
Thank you, Chris Carroll, District 8. I'm to the locations on early voting. And as background, we were told last year that the Fairfield Woods Library wasn't available, which further conversations that I know I had and some others did with our first selectman, God rest his soul, that was not exactly true because it wasn't taken to the right level of authority. Could you tell us who is saying Old Town Hall cannot be used for early voting?
During the first selectman budget meeting, Mr. Becker advised us that we shouldn't use Old Town Hall going forward. I believe there's construction that could be happening.
I just also would like to remind members that we're not choosing locations at this vote. We're only choosing how many early voting. So that's unfortunately not really pertinent to it because we don't have the authority to choose the locations. We only have the authority to choose the amount of locations.
Yes, with due respect, Madam Moderator, knowing the locations would affect my decision on how many to approve. So thank you.
Yeah.
So
Mr. Becker, are you able to?
Is telling us that we can't use Old Town Hall.
That's what we heard.
And
I
we
haven't
haven't
heard any
gone to
additional
the acting
updates.
first select person
Right.
to ask that question.
We could double check again
And I'm not going to put David on the spot for this conversation. I would also say I live near Fairfield University. It's huge. And you're telling me they have no location. Matt, I agree with you. Let's have some consistency here. But we're moving it for reasons that I don't think have been fully explored, which would say to me, yeah, let's just have one location. So explain why we can't use what we did last year. And if not, that affects my vote. And that's why I'm asking those questions. Thank you.
That's fair. Mr. Becker, do you have an answer for the why we can't use Old Town Hall?
I would just say that we're not going to be under construction by November. I think, you know, that may have come up during budget because we are looking at doing renovations at Old Town Hall and Town Hall. We've brought that up for a while now. But looking at this in the middle of July at this point, I can at least for this year tell you that that conference room will be available.
So the probate judges won't be there?
We're not, there's not going to, we're not. For this particular year, there's no way between now.
So it was a temporary reason that we couldn't use Old Town Hall or a
I think
permanent reason?
Yeah, and I understand there's a lot of discussions. I mean, the boards we've talked about, you know, our plans to try to start renovating these buildings. So it's come up on different timelines. So best available current information, I can guarantee that conference room is going to be available as far as any sort of construction or anything like that. We're not in Old Town Hall. We haven't come to these bodies for funding or anything at that level at this point. We're a ways off, but I understand that makes sense on the timeline, you know, but.
I understand. Representative Carroll, did you get your answer?
Yeah.
I got half the answer. And again, so if Old Town Hall is available, but we don't know what the other location would be, it would affect my vote. Again, the reason for my questioning. Do we know why we can't use Fairfield University yet?
There is construction going on, we used last year, and they can't facilitate that now. The only thing they could do, is give us a university bookstore, but the whole second level. So, and there's garage parking there.
The,
and they're
the
looking into
on-campus
that.
site or the one downtown,
The one downtown.
200 yards from Old Town Hall? Like
The
that,
one
right?
downtown, yeah. And Matt and I both did go to the library, Fairfield Woods, and they said no, because really it's a 14-day issue. They couldn't give it to us for the full 14 days.
And did we go to the head of the libraries to get that answer, or did we get it from somebody at the library?
At the library, right?
Yeah, so I know that the first selectman had sort of heard the proceedings last year, and I know that there was interest. One of the things was being discussed was a synagogue very close to the Fairfield Woods Library, and he sort of said, "Let me reach out to the head librarian to see if this would be available." The head librarian believed that it would be appropriate. And when we had our meeting with them, there were sort of like 3 or 4 significant objections. One was the hours didn't align with sort of the library service hours, and they were not sure that staffing would be available to make the building available to us at those times. They were also concerned about they had 2 different sites that we could use at different times, but that existing programming, some of which was after school programming, some of which were routine things that happen there. There are a number of sort of clubs and organizations that have things sort of on the schedule there, that they would conflict with that. And they said, well, we don't necessarily want to make the sewing club not meet that week because you're doing early voting. And so like each one of those problems seemed like on its own, like surmountable, but like when combined, the Woods Library staff said, this is would really be disruptive to the type of programming that we offer, sort of the range of different things that we offer, and they said we weren't able to recommend it. Now, I think if that was a priority to people, like I think it's a great option, but it's also just a question of like, is this their priority or the other things they're doing at the library the priority? And we're sort of a guest in that sense. So, I would say that's a conversation to be had between sort of town leadership and library leadership as to whether that can be made available to us.
And my last question, what are the hours of early voting?
In a typical day, it's 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. There are 2 days in the week prior to the election where there's an 8 to 8 day.
Okay. The library is open from 9 to 8, so they are open.
Typically, except for weekends, days are a little different, and the 2 longer days.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Steele.
Thank you. Jeff Steele, District 3. Just a couple questions on the first part of this. This issue, there was, do you guys both agree on having 2 early voting locations? So, I mean, there's 2 things we're approving here. One is 2 locations for early voting, and then the 10 for same day. Do you both agree on 2 locations? And if so, do you agree on what those locations are?
I'm fine with 2 for this year.
You got to speak a little closer.
I'm fine with 2 for this year. We've been looking into, so far, the only one, but now we have Town Hall that we just heard tonight is available, and Fairfield University. Matt, have you talked to any others?
I've sent out a number of sort of communications requesting from people, like would this be available? Again, the information about Town Hall being back on the board is new. What I would say is for me, my priority is just having as much geographic diversity as possible. I know that last year I came to you and was very interested and excited in making voting more accessible to students through the early voting process. I had recommended 3 last year for that reason. And I'll say the experiment in terms of did the students take advantage of voting being available on the campus for the 2 weeks? I would say by and large that experiment was not successful. That they did not. That we had like 1 or 2 students per day over the 2 weeks, and then something on the order of 300 on the day of the election itself. So making that service available on the campus didn't produce the sort of engagement that we had hoped. So I would say as much as we can like minimize the travel time for people in the town, to say like, if we can have something in the southern part of the town, in the northern part of the town, or the eastern part of the town, and the western part of the town, so that people feel it's as convenient as possible, I'd say that would be.
So you agree
priority.
on 2 though?
Yeah.
Okay, so you agree on 2, then it's an issue of deciding what they are. Obviously, we don't decide that, but you think you can probably come to an agreement on that?
If we have 2 on the board, you know, and if we have 3 on the board, it's like, what are your priorities, right?
But my second question was just, and maybe I just misunderstood it, but I look at this Secretary of State page and it says same day registration is not available at your polling place, but is available at a designated SDR location. So we've listed 10 locations, which I think are all polling locations or the polling locations. How can you do same day registration when the Secretary of State's office says you can't? I don't understand that.
So the guidance document that came from was the 2013 guidance previous to the Public Act in 2020, which allowed multiple per town. And so when that passed, we made an inquiry of the Secretary of State's office about whether that change allowed polling places to be the sites. And our submission to them listed specifically the polling places and said it would be handled, our plan, which is a brief plan, said that it would be handled by the assistant registrars at the polling places. That would be the people performing that task. And they are, an assistant registrar has our authority in our absence, right? That's sort of the hierarchy of our position, is we have deputies and then assistants. And so the assistants at the polling places can accept and approve voter registrations, right? Like that's.
So it can override what is written on the Secretary of State site.
Well, so I'll just say.
So is this incorrect though? That's on the website?
It's not that it's incorrect. It was their advice prior to the current
and they,
law.
but they never updated it in 5 years?
You see that from time to time.
Okay, well, all right, that aside. And then, all right, so the assistant registrar can override that, is what you're saying now?
The 2020 statute that allows multiple per town.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I guess my last question is, what, my understanding is the Secretary of State's attorney does not agree with having 10 locations. Where does that play into your thinking? If they're not willing to potentially recommend the Secretary of State to go 10 locations and they themselves think in a non-presidential year that it should be way less, why wouldn't we consider that, let alone the costs and the training involved in each of those locations for this particular task? It seems, a little excessive for what we need.
You know, I
to hear from Ms. Politi too.
Oh, well, you could start it off. Sure.
The Secretary of State, Aida Carini, she's the lead attorney. She was very clear that she will not approve it. She will not, advise that this should happen. We had issues last year, and that is part of it, where same day registration was allowed to happen at Burr. There was buses of Sacred Heart University students that went there. I was unaware of this, that this was happening. Matt did know about it. Proactively, I believe I could have prevented that from happening. You had basically 58 people that were allowed to vote improperly, breaking statutes. So it's currently being investigated.
All right. Well, I will say that Kathy said something that was not true just there, which is that while the students at Sacred Heart did ask where we would go to register to vote, they were directed to go to our early voting locations and to town hall if they needed to register on election day. So while I was aware that there were students who were wanting to vote, no one was given any direction to go to the Burr Elementary School. The person who was...
But Matt, my question, you got to answer my question. I mean, I was asking about the impact of the cost and location, as well as the fact that the Secretary of State's office has indicated they're not going to approve this. Do you have any comment on that or thoughts?
I'll say, I know our reputation with them, right? We're an office with a lot of conflict. And that's something that's sort of hard to get past with particular staff members there, which I recognize, and that's like a difficulty. I will say that they approved an identical plan in 2020, and it worked very well. We had a great experience with it. The training was not really intensive, and we are available to answer questions for people and provide support to them. We are typically talking to them about every voter who shows up and isn't able to vote. So having a call periodically about, hey, what do I do on the computer? I don't remember this exact step. I don't think would be a big burden. I don't think I've identified any additional costs that would be associated with this because we're using the existing assistant registrar staff to carry out this service. And to the extent that we were typically hiring additional staff to serve same-day registration at town hall, that would, I imagine, be modest cost savings. But again, I don't, if there are cost increases that you might think of or that Kathy might think of, it's certainly possible, but I'm not aware of any increases would be necessary for that.
We would have to order more ballots because if at every polling location, we needed to have districts 1 through 10, which I would be very much against. That would be an increased cost. We really should have, if this was really the plan, we should have let IT know about it and asked them first so they could have put it in their budget. They did not know anything about it. I didn't find anything about this until Matt submitted something to Marcy.
Thank you, Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. Thank you guys very much for coming tonight and giving us your opinions. We know from years past that you don't usually agree and we're going back and forth. So I appreciate hearing both of your opinions. I will say for the same day registration, all the voters in Fairfield, this is like a 1-year thing for the same day registration because the next year they'll be registered and they won't go to that place, right? So if we are trying to teach people where they vote and where their polling location is, and we already have fully staffed places in all the 10 places, I don't see if there's really that much of an additional cost if there's already a polling place at these locations. So if you guys don't agree on these 10, why are we discussing this?
So the in 2023, the statute was changed so that the designation of additional same-day registration locations, which used to be solely the power of the registrars, became the power of the local legislative body.
I understand that because we did this last year.
Well, we didn't bring same-day registration locations to you last year because we were not aware of that change until after the deadline.
But the number of same-day registration, we went back and forth on that a lot.
The number of early.
Oh,
We're not
early vote,
voting on
early
same
voting.
day.
Right,
I
but
think
we're just trying to look at the numbers,
we're
right?
voting.
So I just
So
want
we're
to,
voting on 2 things in this
yes,
resolution.
I understand that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
not the place, just
well,
the
the
number.
place for the same day registration, we are voting on the location. So for the early voting, we are voting on the number of early voting locations. And for same day registration, we are voting on the locations and essentially the number as well by voting on the locations.
Okay, well, I think it's a good thing to teach people where they're going to vote next year. So if they vote, learn to vote, register there, and we already have staff. So
Representative
thank you.
Georgiadis, yep, I'm just going to remind members at this point, just if you have questions, we'll save our comments for next week. Representative Barrett.
Steve Barrett, District 7. So let me get this straight, because I'm kind of getting 2 different things. If we have those 10 different same day registration places, if I live, I'm not registered, I live in District 1. If I show up to District 9, will they have to register me there and I would still vote there?
I would expect so. That's my understanding of the statute. As I said before, our typical process is we check first if you're on the inactive list. we check second if you're in the correct location. And then we would, we historically direct people to the correct location at that time. If we wanted to have a process where we could say, we will only serve that ballot at that polling place, I expect we would need to seek approval for that from the Secretary of State's office.
So ideally you would tell me, go to District 1. I live in District 1. You go to, if I showed up at District 9, you tell me to go to District 1. Okay. If I say, no, I don't want to, I want to vote here, I'd have to be, you'd have to give me a ballot?
You can vote there. We're going to have all the ballots, like in if you're in District 1, from my understanding, you're going to have districts, 1 through 10 ballots there. Because a same day registration location, they are allowed to vote for any district there.
And we need some kind of permission from the state to say you can only vote in your district or only be registered in your district.
The state has already indicated they're not going to approve the 10 locations anyway.
I would say one attorney that we wrote to said that's true. I will say that we know a number of people there who have approved this in the past. So we'll see what happens sort of going forward. The thing that does happen frequently is when people move within the town, they are sent to their new polling place. We do not serve them like if you moved from District 5 to District 6 and you went back to your old polling place, they would tell you have to go to District 6 to vote, right? Like that you're not able to be served regardless for other types of ballots. I expect that we would have to, if you insisted that we would serve you at your at the polling place you appeared at. Now, because the number of ballots is sold to us by the 100, and the number of people we expect per location is 3, I think that we would be able to reasonably apportion a couple of ballots for each district to say, if someone shows up, you'll have a couple of ballots in this folder that you can use to give them, but that the lion's share of the ballots will be for the people at that polling place, right? So if we said we have 100 ballots for each district, we'd send maybe 3 for each district to each of the 10 districts and then 70 to the district, something on that order. We haven't discussed it, so I don't want to say that's the number or whatever, but
As there's a lot of chatter
something like
going
that.
on, if we could.
Okay, one last question. So what we're voting on is either 10 same day or some random number that we come up with? 10 or 1?
You're just voting whether you want an additional location. So it would be 1. I would like 1 location that's what we have historically done, and Matt would like 10.
10 or 1. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, if you wanted 1, you would just strike the second part. You wouldn't pass anything about same day registration locations.
Can I just ask clarifying? So we're just voting on the number for the same day, or we're voting on the locations? Because the way the resolution is currently worded is that we're voting on the locations.
For the locations.
Okay. All set, Representative Barrett? Great, Representative Hardigan.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mike Hardigan, District 3. Question maybe for Attorney Pyers, and happy to have this answered outside of the meeting in email or whatever. So in the memo, Ms. Polito, you mentioned that you sent an email to the Secretary of State. I'm not questioning guidance or suggestions or recommendations, but you're mentioning the wording of the statute. And if we could get some clarification as to what the existing statute actually is, and if there's any reason to interpret location as not meaning locations, anything like that, that would be super helpful.
They did not provide additional guidance on that. That was my original question. And then once Matt submitted the rest of his information, I had problems with the, people not being registered and then being allowed to vote, because he wanted them input the next day, the registrations. So I believe that's not allowed to happen. You're in agreement with that, right? Secretary of State attorney indicated that's not how it's supposed to be done.
I think more what I'm looking for is if at some point we could get the actual statute and the actual wording so we can look at it
Okay, it's
and
actually
maybe
in
an
the
opinion
backup.
from
It's
Attorney
in the
Pyers
backup.
as to if that's
Ms. Polity, do you know what
being
page in the
interpreted correctly.
backup it's on?
This, in the statutory language that I sent, attached, it was, the language under 9-19J.
Sorry, we're trying to decipher through that.
So it is in the backup, the actual statute? Okay, is my question making sense?
Did you want an interpretation of the statute from Attorney Pierce? Attorney Pierce, are you able to come on up and give us a little bit of your opinion? And it's page 48. Thank you, Representative McClote.
On issues like this, typically the town attorney would not override the state Secretary of State's attorney's interpretation. So we would go with the interpretation that they have. I could give you my interpretation, but they're going to be bound to follow what Secretary of State's attorneys are saying, I think, so.
Thank you, Attorney Pierce. Representative Hardigan.
I think I'm good, thanks.
Thank you, Representative Waldron. Are you still have a question?
No, actually, I'm just.
Okay, great. Representative Zezima.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Liz Esma, District 4. Thank you guys for being here. So it looks as if we are the only municipality in the state who had more than one early voting location. Is that correct?
Mansfield also had multiple, and I will say that this year a law was passed requiring towns that I believe the language is meant to apply just to public universities, that public universities with a certain number of on-campus students will also have multiple locations. So we were one of 2 last year, and we would be one of probably 8 or 9 this year.
Yeah, sorry for missing Mansfield. And that was my question. If any of the larger towns and cities that had one location, statutes notwithstanding, would any of them be reconsidering now because they found one location to be insufficient, as far as you know?
Not that I've heard.
Not that I have heard either, especially not in a municipal election.
And then likewise with same-day registration, 2020 being the exception for COVID, it's consistently been one location throughout the state.
Right, and Fairfield was the only place that had the additional locations for SDR in 2020, and that was strictly due to COVID.
Okay, thank you.
Representative McClote.
Megan McClote, District 2. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Hi, Kathy and Matt. Good to see you both. I think it would be incredibly helpful. First of all, I have multiple questions, so obviously I recognize I've got a limit, and before I reel on, I'll let people finish, but rest assured I will reel on. My first question, I think, would be to the tremendous benefit of everybody in this room who I imagine has not utilized the SDR process to actually understand how it works. So if you can either confirm or deny the witnessing I have done of the same-day registration process, is that you may have a line of people out the door, to Mr. Wagner's point, that show up at town hall like they did in the previous election, and they wait online where somebody assists them in verifying their address or verifying any other information. They have to have certain types of documentation to do so. And once they're verified, then they're given a ballot and they're allowed to cast their vote. Is that a correct understanding of the process?
There are a couple more steps, but all that's right.
And if I recall correctly, the verification process included having to prove their address. And if I recall correctly, my recollection serves me, many of them were students. As you mentioned, Ms. Politi, they were from varied districts of Fairfield University. Some of them were trying to show their eligibility by using addresses on their Amazon account, which I found fascinating because I know you can pretty much ship to anybody with Amazon, but you have to verify your address to therefore have your team go and do the background research to confirm, number one, that they haven't tried to vote there, and number two, that they're not actually registered to vote anywhere else. Is that somewhat accurate?
Yes, you really, if it's any other municipality within Connecticut, you do have to make phone calls. So you call the SDR number of the town that they were from, and then they then have to call that specific polling location, who then calls them back, and then they call you back. So it's a long process, and you have to be sure that they didn't vote, but you have to give it at least 5 or 10 minutes. So that takes a long time.
I'll say that process, we find typically that it applies to about 15% of people. When we find that someone is registered previously within Connecticut, that we do those calls. And because at the end of the voting process, the voter does not cast their ballot directly into a tabulator, but rather returns it to us in an envelope, we segregate the envelopes by those which require an investigation and those which do not. Those which do not can be sent directly to the counting location. Those which do require an investigation will typically just hold all of them because I will say the 5 to 10 minute, that is what the Secretary of State sort of has given us as guidance. But we very, very rarely get a call back within 10 minutes under any circumstance. So typically what we're doing is saying, we're going to hold that ballot until 8. And if we get a report from the other town, hey, that voter you called us about, they voted early here, or they voted in person today, like if someone's trying to double vote essentially, then we have their ballot not put through a machine, but sort of separated in an envelope and can flag it and say, no, we're not going to count that ballot because we got a report from this other town, which then becomes like an enforcement question. But that's it's about 15% overall of new voters on election day who are utilizing SDR that were previously registered somewhere else in Connecticut. Among students, that number is about 6%. So typically if a student is coming in, they'll either be coming from another state, they will be a first-time voter, or I think probably for students whose family home is within Connecticut, they would typically go to that location rather than trying to go through the registration process here, right? So if you came from Trumbull, and you're going to Fairfield U, you might just go back to Trumbull, like something like that.
So what you described obviously is quite a process. There's a lot of steps. There's a lot of people involved in doing the proper verification to obviously abide by statute. So is it fair to say what you're proposing here with the second part of the resolution would be doing that times 10? In 10 different locations, you'd have to facilitate exactly what you just described so that it's a fair and equitable distribution at all locations. Is that accurate?
Certainly.
Okay. I do have more questions. Oh, I'm ready to go. Okay. So I heard you say 514 SDRs last year. Large turnout, presidential. I hear you. Previous, there might have been as much as 300 in a municipal. I know Representative Ludwig said maybe we're talking about 30 people. Let's even take that 514 number from the last election, since I think it's most fresh in our minds. What would the percentage per district be? So for instance, of those 514 SDRs, what percentage was from 1 or 2 districts versus the stratification of all 10 districts?
If you would like me to, I don't have that information on hand, but if you would like me to search for it for you,
That'd be
I could
great.
try and do that in the next couple of
Roughly,
minutes.
was it a large predominant district or 2 that showed up, would you say? I remember what I witnessed because I happened to be at town hall for the entire process of the same day registration in the 2024 election. It seemed there was a large percentage from 1 or 2 districts.
I would say that's probably accurate. A lot of the, college students, I would say there wasn't many from Sacred Heart that came. But there was, I would say, probably 7 and 8, 9 and 10.
And even in maybe the remaining 6 districts, were there perhaps no same day registrations at some of those districts?
I recall, but don't take this. I'm not positive, but I recall that there was some from every district.
Okay. Matt, you mentioned a simplified education effort as being part of the reason you were endorsing the 10 locations. My question on the education outreach we do for same-day registration is because, forgive me, maybe I'm naive, but I didn't know we had a specific education targeting people that had not yet been registered to vote. If we do, how do we do that? Is it postcards? Is it social media blasts? How are we informing those that are not already registered to vote on where they should be voting?
So for the last, I think, trying to think, 2015, I think is when we started it. We've been doing an annual postcard mailing pre-election to people, sort of covering some stuff that is common, right? Like we want to tell people what's on the ballot. We want to tell people where they go to vote. what they're expected to bring with them, how to get an absentee ballot. Like there's a few things that are in common every time. And then we'll also sort of talk about what the sort of current topics are, right? So last year, there was a lot of information about early voting and the other subjects are sort of compressed down a little bit more. So that mailing, for the first few years we did it, we sent to a householded list of registered voters in the town. So we say, everyone who's registered, we're going to mail something to your house. You know, if you have 3 family members, it'll say the 3 family members on the postcard, and it will tell you, here's where you go to vote. And then here's all the stuff in common that we're telling everyone in the town. In 2020, what we did was we switched to sending to what's called a saturation list in sort of postal terminology, which is where you mail to every household, right, to every residential address in the town, and you say, here is where you go to vote. If you are registered, or if you're not registered, right? So we didn't need to break out separate information asking people to ascertain their status as a registered voter. And one of the things that you'll see, like even, you know, people would come to the same day registration location and they'd wait in line, and then they would discover, oh, I actually have to go out to my polling place because I'm an inactive voter. So I have to fill out a form at my polling place to be able to vote. So like they were coming to us at town hall and then being sent somewhere else because like they were not on the public list of registered voters because that's like just not included on what the state provides. So, you know, being able to say to someone, whether you're registered or not, this is the spot to go, sort of simplifies the amount that people need to learn. And I have to say, like, I love this stuff and I could talk to you all day about it, right? Which is great. But like, I think most voters have like a very narrow bandwidth for like how much election process information they are like willing or able to absorb in a normal year. And so I think that it's helpful to be able to say like, you know, just go here. This is the spot. Which, what if, you know, I didn't reverse engineer what was the turnout effect of that? Like, did that make a difference in terms of how many people used it or anything like that? But I do think it simplified how we tell people what to do.
So in your terms, just go here actually means just go one of 10 places if your resolution were to be passed, because we'd be giving them access to all the information on all the different places they could go, giving them more information than they might actually need, because really, in reality, only 1 out of the 10 places would technically apply to them as their polling location.
We would not, like, never tell someone who votes at like Sherman about McKinley, right? Like, that's like, you know, you don't need to know that, guys, right? Like, this is like District 9 votes here.
So the mailings would all be stratified based on the district, requiring additional mailings for each district, not just one blanket global mailing. They have to be specific to the location and the district in which you send it.
We've been able to have that printed on the same pass with the address. So like, we don't make separate mailings. We just say you vote at, and then there's like an arrow and it says their location is inkjetted on at the same time that their address is inkjetted on. So we're not producing 10 separate mailings. We're producing one mailing that has the variable data on it.
And we outsource that to a company, I imagine. We're not postmasting all of those.
The one thing that confuses me though is what do you do for Fairfield U students or Sacred Heart students? How do you tell them where to go? Because they're in split districts and they're all at the same address, like 5151 Park Avenue or 1073 North Benson. How would you know the specific district?
So I'm happy to, you know, through you.
Go ahead.
This was something that came up with the last redistricting process. There was a question about should the university be divided into multiple districts. Sacred Heart has the Bridgeport Fairfield thing. And what it requires us to ask of students when they register is what dormitory building they reside in. And that information is, it has a shelf life, right? Like if you register to vote in 2024, in 2026, when you come out again, you might be in a different district because you've moved within the campus. So a part of the process that we have to do to manage that, and for Sacred Heart, the dynamic is more that if you register as an underclassmen, in one dorm, right? Like the freshmen and sophomores typically live in the Fairfield side and the juniors and seniors typically live on the Bridgeport side. We have to be in touch with the universities to say, hey, we need to know where your students are living now so that we can update our list to put people in the correct dorms. Right. So that is a part of like how we like prepare for the election, is to say, all right, let's get the list. Let's figure out who's no longer here, and we move them to no known dormitory, so that if they do appear at a polling place, we inquire from them, well, where are you living now, right? The university has taken you off their on-campus residence list, so you need to supply us with more information before we can allow you to vote. If you're at Sacred Heart and you've moved from the Fairfield side to the Bridgeport side, we say you've got to go to Bridgeport, right? That is the process that you're expected to do, is because we no longer have you on the list, we can't allow you to vote here. Because the universities are not on the residence list, there's about 300, 400 voters that that are not on the saturation list, and we'll mail to them like individually, separately. I do think that it might be worthwhile to say, how do you reach the university students sort of to educate them more directly? I will say in 2012 was the last election where the universities had individual student mailboxes that we could mail something to every single student and put it in their hands. Now they get like an email when mail comes to them. So like we can't just say, send one to everybody in the way that we did. So we need to work with them to sort of do direct communications to the students by email. There's a requirement under the Higher Education Act that that's something that they should be doing like on a somewhat consistent basis anyway. And so I do think that we should do better with that. And like, how do we educate them more effectively is a good question. But in terms of how do we directly communicate what locations individual students go to, we communicate with those who are registered at the same time as the voter population in Fairfield to say, because you live in Roncalli Hall, this is the location that you're going to, right? Like based on that information we get from the school in October.
Okay, so obviously the same day registration necessarily wouldn't apply if we're only communicating to the ones that are already registered. So sounds like you guys need to unpack that a little bit, but certainly sounds like there's a lot of work around that. There was some conversation about the risk of the wrong ballot. That obviously should concern everybody in this room. Nobody wants to disenfranchise a single vote from being cast. So when we have a wrong ballot situation, if that risk were to increase because we have 10 times exponentially increased the number of places of which they're monitored, supervised, and cast legally, if we were to increase that risk, am I correct that when someone votes on the wrong ballot and it's identified, that vote is just lost? There's no way for us to go back and say, take two, try again, right? By that point, generally the polls have closed.
You can take that one.
Okay, what I'll say is that when we identify a ballot that has been given to a voter who doesn't live in that district, and this is something that we were able to quantify during the years that we did absentee ballot counting at the polling places, because the machines would physically reject the ballot. So we'd say, oh, it appears that this absentee ballot voter got the wrong ballot. And so we got a sense of sort of how many it was in that context. What we will do is hand count every office on the ballot, except for the office that the voter was not eligible to vote in. So for this year, it would be the RTM. And so, because that information is kept in envelopes, right? So we say, okay, this voter, their ballot was from District 7, but they live in District 8. We would be able to have that information so that, I'll say if there was like something that was close, and, a lot of what we do is kind of oriented towards, if there is a legal challenge, the stuff we have is like evidence, right? So someone said, well, I lost my RTM race by 2 votes and 4 people I think got the wrong ballots. We would go back and look at those envelopes. We would say, okay, well, we have the names of the people who were given that ballot. It may be that a court would say, well, let's allow them to vote for that office to resolve that question. Like that might be something that a court could order.
Has that ever happened in the history of Fairfield where we actually allowed somebody to vote after the fact of identifying perhaps in a recount? That would be a case of first impression I'm aware of, but.
I will say, I know that last year, one of our early voting spots, the ballot clerk gave everyone the same ballot for the first like 3 minutes of the day. And we summoned those voters back to town hall to give them the correct ballot. Like, so we were able to like isolate the specific people who were given those ballots, and we got them to come back and said, all right, take this one out of this envelope and here's the correct one, and now put it back in. And so that was something we were able to do to sort of resolve that particular problem that popped up.
But odds are, if it's happening at a polling location, you wouldn't know. Basically, at central count, they're not allowed to look at the ballot inside. We have to maintain the privacy of the vote. So they're just going to open that envelope and put it through the same day registration machine, and it's going to tally it. And I doubt we're ever going to know.
So that being said, last two questions, I promise, I'll let you off the hook. The training that would have to happen for all of these people at 10 locations, assuming there's at least one at each location, that's 10 people would have to be trained in order to supervise the execution of a same-day registration process. I don't think we currently have 10 people trained to do that, but perhaps I'm wrong. I guess my question is, the people that we train obviously are not going to be registrars of voters, right? They don't have the same obligation of upholding the statutory obligations that you both have the privilege of having. So how would you both, and I'd like you both to answer separately, feel with the comfortability of upholding your obligation by that statute if that were the case?
What I found during early voting, when people are there just to do early voting, that's a simple process. They look the person up, they're already existing there. All they have to do is insert a ballot and print a label. That's all they have to do. So that's completely different than the same day registration process. I was only comfortable with someone in our staff doing that, because it does take months, to be proficient at it, and you have to do it on a daily basis or regularly in order to be comfortable. I would not be comfortable at all with anything else. And during early voting, we always had one person doing all the same day registrations, and we always had the moderator holding those envelopes because they're different envelopes. So you would raise your hand, you need a same day registration, and that way, it would have to be processed separately.
So I'll say we're already bringing these people in for training. We do have, we trained 20 people to do it in 2020. I would say well over a dozen in 2024, because with early voting and the computer training that was involved, we had over 14 days, people, typically 6 or 8 people doing this work every single day over those days. So we did develop a certain amount of talent and experience in that context. They would come to us, right? If there's something they didn't understand or something that they didn't know what to do, that we would be able to sort of assist them. But the number of scenarios that are genuinely strange, like I would feel differently about someone doing this all day with none of us around to answer any of their questions, right? And I think that in a lot of small towns, that's the experience that they're having that I sort of worry about as a registrar. Like if you have a full-time job as a registrar and you are not physically present during early voting, the person who's doing that job for you, like really needs to have your level of experience at least to be able to do that. I found that, we added about a 30-minute computer training to the process in 2020, and that was, it worked well. The materials that we developed in 2020, we made use of in 2024 for early voting. If that's something, I guess, if either the materials are of interest to you or if actually receiving that training is of interest to you, we'll just say,
Let's stay on the topic.
Reach us individually as RTM members if you would like to sort of see how this works and sort of see.
I'm sorry, let's just keep going.
Yeah. Offline. But I found that, there are people who are not good at computers at all, but if you have people who are technically savvy, it's I think not a very large training burden.
So
for
you
them.
feel comfortable,
I am, yeah.
basically. Okay. Very last question. It's only for you, Mr. Wagner, because I think Ms. Politi has made us acutely aware of her position on the Secretary of State's attorney's legal opinion. Obviously, you've acknowledged that the Secretary of State, one attorney, your words, disagrees and would not be inclined to endorse this. Our own town attorney has also mentioned that he's not inclined to overrule the Secretary of State's attorney's advice. If somehow this body were to pass those 10 locations and we were to receive further indication that we would not be allowed to move forward by the Secretary of State's office, what would you then propose we do to fix this in time for an election?
Well, if you passed a resolution saying we want these 10 locations and they subsequently reject it, there would be no time on the calendar to adopt any further resolution for any more than one. So what would happen if they rejected it, I imagine, would be we would have to identify one location where it would be held.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here, you both.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding this item? Thank you both for being here. Appreciate it. Moving on, I'm going to take so we're going to do the historic properties ordinance, and then we're going to move to the Connecticut Municipal Development Authority, and we'll see where we are. We'll leave rules to regulate at the end and see where we're at with that. So we're moving on. Our Legislation and Administration Committee passed the Historic Properties Ordinance amendments out of committee last month. This is agenda item 9 and can be found in our backup on pages 71 to 97. Representative Zezima and Maura Garich from the Historic District Commission are here to present and answer questions on this item. Please note, we will not be voting on this item until our August meeting as per our rules to regulate. But since Ms. Garich is here, she's been sitting here since the beginning. I did want her to be able to present today. So thank you for waiting.
So I'm here from the HDC, and Darren Raymond Locke is also here, who is actually the owner of the house and has prepared most of the information that has been submitted and been approved so far.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
So you have the information that was in the packet, and this project has been, or the house has been approved. It is on the state registry. It has been approved by P&Z. It was presented already to you one time? No, I'm sorry, the HDC has approved this to be, SHPO has approved it. And so now it is up for approval by the RTM. And I guess really it comes down to, if you had a chance to read the information, do you have specific questions? Because for the brevity, I don't want to repeat the whole thing for you.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions regarding this for them? Online? See none. Thank you so much both for waiting here for this long. We appreciate we appreciate it. We appreciate it. Thank you for
One of our meetings. We're fast.
Thank you. We're going to move on. We have Representatives Colburn and McCabe, as well as Connecticut Municipal Development Authority Director David Corse here to answer questions regarding agenda item 7. I believe Ms. Harrigan is also here to answer questions. And this is, agenda item 7, which is whether to authorize the first select person to enter into a memorandum of agreement or other similar agreements with the Connecticut Municipal Development Authority. Backup for this item can be found on pages 37 to 38, as well as under the more and additional documents. Unfortunately, that was not working well. I believe I sent that to you earlier this afternoon, so there is a summary that was sent to RTM members earlier. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for waiting so long.
All right. Thanks, everybody. So we put together this process step, kind of giving you a little bit more color, because I think one of the things during the public hearing we heard was just confusion about all right, how does this thing work? Like, why do we have to opt in? What is this opt-in process? So we wanted to give more clarity around what are the steps. Hopefully we were able to accomplish that. I don't really have anything else because you guys didn't get to ask questions during the public hearings. This is really a moment to do that, and I encourage those questions and look forward to them.
So we'll start by taking questions. Representative Blanchard.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Just a reminder for the folks watching, can we be clear about what we're actually voting on tonight? I know what it is, and I know that three of you do, but there's a lot of confusion that we're moving too quickly in this process, when I know what we're doing is beginning the process of exploring whether or not we want to give the Board of Selectmen permission to potentially enter in an MOU with the, exactly. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely right, Representative. I'll reiterate, this is the first step of many. It does not bind the town to anything. It does not commit the town to anything. It is literally the indication that we require that there's enough interest locally to engage in a conversation so that we can allocate time and energy and resources towards that conversation, which may ultimately result in a memorandum of agreement that sets out more detailed parameters for how we might invest in infrastructure or projects within the town. This doesn't do any of that. It merely starts the process. As I said, I think a couple times before, we could theoretically partner with probably about 100 municipalities in the state. This is the way that we narrow down that list to the interested folks so that we can prioritize our energy and time towards the conversation with folks who may ultimately get to a memorandum of agreement.
Just a quick follow-up question. There's still a possibility that if the Board of Selectmen, after consulting with you, constituents, planning and engineering department members, could still vote no to not join via the MOU still, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I'll just clarify, and it does make it confusing. The first step, this opt-in resolution, is quote unquote joining us by statute, but it's not advancing the relationship towards anything related to implementation. And so, yes, it is absolutely possible that we don't get to an MOA.
Thank you, Representative Cook-Littman.
Tara Cook-Littman, District 2. I just first wanted to say thank you very much for the process steps that you sent us. I thought that was really clear and helpful. And so in just reviewing them, because I know there was a lot of discussion last week on people being concerned that this was somehow going to be impacting our local zoning laws or overruling them. So I just want to clarify, because I'm pretty sure I understand, that you may make recommendations to our zoning regs, but our zoning commission is under no obligation to accept those. They can vote yes, no, turn it down.
Correct. There may be a scenario where we make recommendations and we may make future steps and funding contingent upon those acting on those recommendations, but you are in no way obligated and we have no ability to override the zoning commission's action on those recommendations.
Thank you. That's what I thought. Just wanted to clarify for sure. And then something else that kept coming up. It seems to me that this is all about development, but not necessarily affordable housing. It's not like you have to do affordable housing if we work with you. They're totally separate ideas.
Yeah, so our statute does not include an affordability requirement. Of all the various kind of ways in which the state is involved with housing, we are exclusively focused on production and the role of housing in achieving economic development objectives of a municipality, which isn't to say that depending on how our conversations go on a community by community basis, some communities are exclusively looking at affordable housing. Other communities exclusively want market rate housing. Some are somewhere in between. We can support any of those scenarios dependent on what the municipality that we're partnering with is prioritizing.
So just to follow up to that, if we're going to prioritize affordable housing while we're in the, is it 4 years moratorium? And we say, look, we don't want 830G to come bearing down on us again in 4 years. That is something that you can assist us with if we as a community prioritize that.
The production of affordable housing during the moratorium period, absolutely.
I know. I just wanted to make sure that. So, and then finally, I just want to say that I do think this is a really good tool in our toolbox because what we've been doing isn't working and we need help in this municipality. So I really do hope that our body will move this forward.
Thank you. Representative Donnie? All set? Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate, Representative Ludwig.
Christine Ludwigsack, District 8. Guys, thank you so much for your information tonight and in last month as well. Just wanted to, I guess, get some clarification or I believe confirmation that if funding were accepted by the town or private developers, would there be any stipulation or any other variable that other lenders would view that they might not enable them to, I guess, access funds from other lenders? Is there anything involved that could be a criteria that, that would change the future path of the project?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, listen, there are some banks that prefer not to be alongside public funding, right? Or some banks that have their own underwriting standards. But in terms of our relationship with other funding sources, we will almost exclusively be subordinate to a primary lender. And so it wouldn't affect the ways that a project would traditionally be financed. Which isn't to say that every bank that could be active in a project would want to be alongside us, but the vast majority shouldn't have a problem with it. What we find, and not to go too far down this tangent, but what we find today is you've got sort of three factors: higher interest rates, increasing construction costs, and then banks modifying their loan to cost or their loan to value ratio, which requires an additional funding source beyond primary lender and equity. And that is where we would come in the same way that mezzanine debt would typically come in. Sorry, does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to add on to what you said and actually ask you a question, David, and those barriers you just mentioned that you just listed, those are the barriers that exist for why we don't have production of housing that we have approved, presumably, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think there remains a mismatch between what the market can deliver and what the financial community will support and what developers are willing to put in with equity. And that's our job, is to try and identify projects in the best case scenario, projects that have been approved and already have local support, but for one of these or some other reason are not yet breaking ground, and to be the difference to bring them to fruition.
I'll actually ask another question, which is because I have heard this a couple times in the days following the public hearing. Do you guys impose any housing requirements in terms of number of dwelling units that we must add as a town once we opt in?
No.
Thank you. I said my piece at the public hearing. I'll say my piece once again in next week, but I will just add a couple of really quick things. One is that while we are opting in, it is still a long process, as we just talked about. Number two is that I really am a big believer in the fact that and I mentioned planning last time that we have not been a good planning town. I don't mean that from a TPZ lens specifically. What I mean there is from a more strategic level, all bodies, prior administrations, everyone in the town, I don't think has done the best job. And I think that's because we're a resource-strapped town, like many municipalities are. And Representative Cook-Lippman mentioned something that I said, which is this is a tool in our toolbox. Our toolbox right now, in my opinion, is very limited. We have like a hammer. So while CMDA is a great resource, it's not like it's a huge resource. No offense, David, but it's another hammer, or maybe it's a screwdriver that we have. Yeah. So that's my second point. The third point is if we can get like my big idea is rather than us kind of being a reactive municipality to things like 830G projects that keep on coming in, if we can take developed or undeveloped or underdeveloped land offline through smart development, whether it's middle housing, mixed use, whatever you want to call it, that takes speculative pressure, in my view, from the market off of us. And that's, I think, what we need.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Steele.
Thank you. Excuse me, Jeff Steele, District 3. So just circling back on just the themes of, what we've talked about and what the real goal is here. We talk about planning and zoning, and that was one of the things that was brought up at the meeting that, we couldn't really ask about. We had 2 members of planning and zoning attend and comment on. I would love to hear what planning and zoning and not just 2 members, but really the body thinks about that. Is there any intention to talk to them or to have discussed this with them prior to or during the process, because they are our planning and zoning people? And where is it that you or the organization can fill gaps that our planning and zoning is not doing? So our planning and zoning is, they're busy developing our town, and our town is doing just that. It is growing and developing, maybe too much, obviously, on housing in some people's minds, but look at the Metro Center area has grown. What is it? Where does TP&Z lack that you feel you're going to fill those gaps better than they're able to do? And what is the ultimate goal?
Sure. So I'll take a first stab at it and then pass it over to Emmeline. So just on the first question about like talking to TPZ, engaging with them, and like that could come later, right? I wouldn't do that before you opt in, right? So I mean, the most important point that I could make there is like we haven't not had a conversation with a board or a commission. That's what triggering this process. That's what this step enables to happen. If there's TPZ or any other board or commission that should be part of a discussion with us or where we might be able to be supportive, that's what happens after you opt in. In terms of what we can add that they're not already doing, I wouldn't frame it that way necessarily. I think the 2 things that we bring that a municipality wouldn't typically have is first and foremost implementation dollars, right? So it very well could be that you have an existing plan or existing ideas, but haven't had the ability to move them forward. And that's where we primarily come in. And the other big thing that we do is, I think, geographically, towns do plans of conservation and development, and Emmeline can speak about the planning that occurs at the municipal scale. And then it's pretty much all at the site level, right? Projects get proposed on a parcel and they get reviewed by P&Z and determine whether they're in conformance with the plan or the zoning. We're meant to be that kind of geography in between that looks at the neighborhood scale and how all the pieces come together, the housing, the economic development, the jobs, the retail, the infrastructure in a neighborhood to create a place that adds value to the community. And that isn't always done. It's not done. Sometimes municipalities do neighborhood scale plans. Fairfield has done some, but it's often the one that there's the least resources to do at the local level, and that is what we're designed to support with.
And if I
Thank you.
could just follow up with that. In our POCD, we have several additional studies that are identified, including for the downtown area, because we have some parcels, the commercial environment is still a bit unstable. So for example, I've brought up the Rite Aid side in the past. Rite Aid is going bankrupt, right? So that is a site that is not consistent with what we love about downtown Fairfield, where the buildings are closer to the sidewalk. It's got this huge parking lot in front. The building is really far set back. And we have regulations that get us part of the way to attracting a building that we want to see, but the regulations are not there entirely. And I see this as a potential to really engage the community, to help them understand that next level of regulation that we need to get to, so that we end up with the fabric that people love about Fairfield Center, and we can entice more private development that meets those development goals.
Representative McClote.
Megan McLeod, District 2. In full transparency, I'm still very much trying to get my head around what CMDA is. I've done a lot of research and I hear you that all we would be doing is opting in. I really hope that you guys hear us, and by that I mean the collective us, the Fairfield, over 60,000 residents, that if you just Google what 830G means to us, we are uniquely sensitive to the concept of development. I hear you, it is not 830G what we're talking about. I heard there's no affordability component. But we cannot deny the reality.
Sorry, Ms. Representative, do you have a question?
I do. I want to know how our reality, which is basically an ambush of 830G affordable housing, is going to coincide with our partnership in CMDA if we were to move forward, because I just cannot emphasize enough on behalf of the constituents, we are under attack. So we are literally going to be at the same time through a moratorium we barely just exhaled through, considering a partnership of housing that may or may not have an affordability concept, but it's still the same time and place. It's 2025. How are we going to balance that? And perhaps it's a question for you, Miss, from zoning, because from you having to balance all of those, I hear them no affordability, but we can't change the fact that we're going to have these massive developments all coming in at the same time. How do we balance that?
So to clarify, if you're building a development within Fairfield that includes over 10 units, there is an affordability component that is built into our current regulations, and our Plan and Zoning Commission has been fairly dedicated to that, also in partnership with the Affordable Housing Committee that we've worked on, increasing the affordability ratio. So in other, like in the TOD districts, that goes up to 12%. In the Center Design District, that goes up to a 20% affordability requirement. Now, in some cases, what I will say is the 830G projects, as you know, that's a 30% affordability requirement, which means that they have to build very large projects. I will tell you that we have areas in town where we have buildings that are aging out of usefulness. And it's those smaller sites with long-term property owners where we really have to engage with them and understand what's viable for them to entice them to build something that is more scale appropriate given their long-term ownership of those properties, instead of them getting frustrated because we don't have the regulations that support a development that's going to pencil out for that small local developer. And then in 4 years from now, which will go by very, very quickly, to be honest, if we are not ready with new regulations that allow those local property owners to reinvest in their properties, we will see 830G again. And that's my concern as somebody who works in planning and zoning and with my commission has been doing meetings every single week since January. So this is really to engage those local people who own properties in our community.
So am I hearing that correctly, that you're saying that even though there's no affordability requirement, it's still going to assist based on the statutory evidence, right? You already have these areas that are going to assist towards the issue of the affordable housing, just by nature. So you were saying the different development districts, transit-oriented development, all those things, there's still going to be a certain percentage over 10 dwelling units, right, that would have to qualify for affordability.
For any development over 10 units, we require 10% of those units to be deed restricted affordable.
Right, and as
At
I
minimum.
understand, right, I understand
And in some
CMDA's.
districts, it's higher.
Right, but I don't think CMDA is talking about single-family homes, right?
Correct.
So we're likely to also be meeting the same need at the same time, actually without intending to do so. Is that what I'm hearing?
Fairfield is fairly committed to an affordability component in, multifamily projects. So that was something that the Plan and Zoning Commission adopted many years ago.
They would be working in tandem. Some of these developments perhaps might actually achieve some of the long-term affordability goals, even though you are obviously very articulate in saying it's not a requirement for the program. It might actually achieve the affordability requirement by statute.
Yeah, 100%. I'm just trying to be clear that we do not have a specific affordability requirement. We don't target a specific percentage of a development or a specific percentage of area median income. But as I think made very clear, we defer to local zoning. And so you already have an inclusionary zoning policy. So any projects that we support would abide by your existing local requirements.
Perfect. That's what I wanted to hear articulated. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Thank you. Representative Shea.
Hi, thank you all for being here tonight. Chris Shea from District 2. Mostly for our planning department director. So we have 3 transit train stations right now, which are the TODs, right? The districts. And then we have at least 1 downtown. I don't know if there are more areas that are considered downtowns or could be considered downtowns. And I'm wondering also, I mean, since you haven't specifically spoken to this gentleman about what may or may not be as a result of us joining this, are there like restrictions on heights for buildings? That are you talking about maybe increasing building heights? And what are your thoughts, for example, in Southport at the train station in the historic district?
We haven't really gotten that far. What I will tell you is that we have existing transit-oriented development zoning in place, both in the center. And in the center, there's an overlay that's available within the design residence district that allowed for the construction of the anchorage, for example. So there have been zoning changes along the way that have allowed for certain development projects. The most comprehensive transit-oriented development regulations are in the Fairfield Black Rock train station area. And that's where we've been seeing a lot of the projects. There have been along the way also zoning regulation revisions because one of the things that we've understood through doing our TOD study back in 2019 is the way that our zoning regulations were structured were too rigid in terms of looking for a 50-50 proportionality between commercial in a mixed-use building and the residential component. And what we've come to understand, both through engaging with the development community and also through a market analysis that was done as part of that study, is really where we should be focused is on ground floor commercial, and within the volume of what we allow with what we feel is scale and context appropriate. The rest of those stories are appropriate to be residential. So that's one of the changes that was most recently adopted by our Plan and Zoning Commission, for example, in the Center Business District, which took the 5-story, 50-foot height volume that was previously allowed and converted that to 4 stories, 52 feet in height, so that we get a ground floor that is taller in volume and more flexible and adaptable, and then 3 stories of residential above. Now, what I will say is that currently around the Southport train station, the scale is much more modest in size, and right now that's a neighborhood design district, which allows lower height, lower floor area ratio, buildings that are limited in overall size and square footage. So each train station has its own design context in terms of the standards that apply. And we would be engaging in this process with David to determine whether or not those minimally meet the requirements today, or whether they would need to be modified, but we're not at that step yet.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up. And so for the Black Rock station, it seems, what percentage of that is still left to be developed?
I would say that the movie theater part, I mean, I can't give you square footage percentages, but, you know, right now, BJ's is the only thing that's active on that parcel. You have the movie theater portion that is not active. You've got a lower level parking structure that's barely used. So there are underutilized parcels. With the Metro Crossing site, that was approved for a development that was probably not at the density that it should have been for its initial review. We did a pre-app for that site. That is a site that we expect to come back to us with hopefully something that frankly has less surface parking, which was a horrible design feature of that particular proposal. So I think that there's several parcels that are in play, and a lot of these we can't sometimes predict. You know, we have long-term property owners, and when they're ready to sell and they're ready to kind of look to redevelop, we hear about it through the Economic Development Office or through Plan and Zoning. But sometimes we don't know that people have been quietly, you know, putting properties together. So I would say that, again, given some of the age of some of the structures, it's, you know, there are portions of town that will probably start to request some sort of review, both with Mark's office and my office, to see what they could do with those parcels.
Thank you. And I guess the money that would be available with joining this would maybe spur that development, because maybe right now it's not economically feasible for some of this to happen. And with us coming on board with you, that might get the interest of some developers to kind of push it, maybe bridge funding, or push it into a point where it would be feasible.
Yeah, with the important distinction that it would be in alignment with the areas that the town prioritizes, right? And so I think, you know, it doesn't require denigrating the past planning effort to say that things have been unpredictable, right? And if you want them to be more predictable, then it takes a combination of identifying the places where you do want certain types of growth, and then making the investments in either the infrastructure or the gap financing to maximize the likelihood that it happens in those locations and in the ways that you've hoped for.
And I just, one other.
Can I
quick-
just piggyback on what David
Yes.
said? I just wanted to say that that is exactly, for example, why I'm very interested in co-sponsoring this, because I think that understandably, we've approached in some ways like our zoning or even how we react to things as a way of saying no. And I think what we're hearing from Emmeline and from David is that this is an opportunity for us to have a tool that can actually allow us local control on the kind of development that we would like to see, and to actually imagine what that is, and then to be able to approach both zoning and a potential funding mechanism that can incentivize ahead of time what we want to see. And it's an exciting moment to be able to take the reins as opposed to sort of receive things that happen to us. So it makes this a very unique proposition for this town.
Thank you for that. Just one other thing. This is probably not in a half-mile radius of any place that it would need to be, but I've always driven by the Home Depot site that across the street from Home Depot that I think it's a Superfund site, and it would be so wonderful if there was a way to get some economic investment in that piece of property.
And I apologize for not introducing you. Mark Barnhart, our economic development, is here.
I don't want to prolong the evening discussion, but, Handy and Harmon obviously is top of mind. It is not a Superfund site, just to be clear. But there are legacy environmental issues that do need to be dealt with. It's under consent order with the state of Connecticut. And the company has been engaged in an effort to identify and develop a remedial action plan for the site. Certainly, if we had a development interest that made sense, that penciled out, that process would probably go a lot quicker. But as for now, the site, because of the fact there isn't sufficient development interest in the site, and you only have approximately 2 to 3 acres of that large portion that's actually developable, that's what, the issues that David had identified earlier in terms of cost, financing, not to mention the fact that you have an environmental site with a significant cleanup cost associated with it. Those are all issues, and clearly to the extent to which, the other thing that David had mentioned before, which is very helpful to have the state engaged, is oftentimes we have sites like this. The Miller Volkswagen site is another property where you have a lot of state agencies involved. You may have competing public policy goals that do need to be aligned. And sometimes it's helpful to have the active engagement of the state to bring those parties together. So you have everyone kind of working off the same sheet of music and developing the site in a way that addresses obviously the environmental issues, but also other public policy goals along the way. So I think that has another thing that David had mentioned before, which I think has not been discussed tonight. That's an important component too, in ensuring that we have the state working as a partner with us in concert with our local community goals.
Thank you, Representative Bremen.
Thank you. This question is for Mr. Corris. So the CMDA process, does that contemplate that the city or town like Fairfield may already have a zone that meets the criteria for a housing growth zone and therefore a development district?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is very, I don't want to make any commitments or any guarantees, but it is very possible, if not plausible, that we could sign off on Fairfield Metro right away. And then we may have recommendations for downtown, and just to throw it out, we may never look at Southport, right? I mean, it could be any combination of those, but it absolutely contemplates that existing zoning could be certified as is.
Thank you. And if the CMDA does make recommendations for modifications to zoning regulations, the town doesn't have to pursue those.
Correct.
And if the town pursues those recommendations, chooses to pursue those recommendations for changes to the zoning, then the TPZ doesn't have to approve those changes.
Correct.
Thank you.
And it is worth noting, I know we said it, but the first selectman, the next step, if we do approve this, is the first selectman then decides which zones they want to look at. So it's very likely, I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone other than myself, but it's very likely that they will just put Fairfield Blackhawk, or maybe they will put Fairfield Blackhawk and downtown. We don't know what combination or what they're going to want to look at.
And it could also play out over time, right? Where we start tomorrow could evolve. But you don't have to tackle everything at once. You can start wherever makes most sense.
And then, if I'm not mistaken, there's even another step before that, which is the MOA, correct? Right, and that is something that actually goes before the Board of Selectmen. So there's multiple steps before one would even move forward with an agreement.
Thank you. Representative Woke.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Jay Wolk, District 5. So basically, my question is, I have something to say afterwards, but and quick, Marcy. Anyway, I'll get you through the J Vortex. Anyway,
Hey, ask your question, please.
I will. Eddie, you're basically, let me just say, so CMDA is basically a consultant firm to the town, correct?
Yeah, with our own money. Yeah,
Right. So this is a good thing.
it's a great thing.
I don't understand all the fluff about it, but anyway, just to tell you quick about Mark, the Rooster River, the.
Representative Wolk, I'm going to ask
well-
you to
Well, no, I
make your
just-
comments
well,
next.
I'll
Nope,
tell
if
you-
it's not a question, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you
No,
off.
well, wait, but just.
Is it a question?
Well, has to do with the
If it's a question-
Volkswagen property.
If it's not a question, I'm sorry, I'm
Let
going to
it
ask
go.
you to
All
say
right,
it next
go.
week.
All right.
Thank you. Anyone who hasn't asked a question, Representative Donnie's already asked a question, so I'm just making sure, I believe on this. Oh. Oh, okay, I'll give it to you. Representative Donnie.
Hi, Nancy Donnie, District 6. Maybe I'll stand. I'm the same size no matter what. So this might be for Emmeline. We don't have an approved POCD 7 years into our 10-year, right? So how would that affect working with Mark and his team when we don't have any planning?
Well, we have a hearing scheduled for September 9th, so cross your fingers. I think so the Plan and Zoning Commission have collectively decided that they would like to adopt the POCD prior to the elections. So I think that is something that they've talked about publicly amongst themselves, and they've committed to doing that. And then we still have some ARPA funds for doing zoning regulation revisions. So that's my hope, is that we can start that process relatively quickly following that POCD adoption.
Any other questions for members who haven't asked a first? Okay, Representative McClote, second.
Just one last question for you, Emmeline. You're here in your capacity, obviously, to let us know if TPZ has already reviewed this, or have they reviewed? Is it their position that they would pass it?
No, I'm simply here for the POCD, or?
Nope, for the CMDA evaluation.
No, they haven't looked at it. That's not where we are in the process. So I'm just here in case anybody has any questions about what our zoning says now in relationship with concerns about, do we presently have TOD regulations, or what the status of our regulations are today in relationship to, do we qualify, or that type of thing,
I see.
based on that.
Have you had any conversation with our TPZ that suggests that they are in favor of passing this, or has that not even happened yet?
We're not at that step.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe let me frame it like from a different perspective, right? Because the way that this operates in, I don't want to say most, but many communities, is there's not necessarily any involvement from TPZ because TPZ is already passed zoning that governs the station area, and we're just coming in to finance projects, right? So it's very plausible that in a lot of communities, and as I said, maybe in Fairfield Metro, I don't want to make a hard commitment, but they're not approving anything because it's based on your zoning that they've already passed themselves. It would only come before them if we have recommendations. Now, the way that we would engage with them, once you're a member, they want to sit down with me, we'll sit down and we'll chat, and I'll tell them about what we're doing in different communities, and I'll tell them about how we can help, and maybe they'll ask for help with a study, or there could be a whole bunch of back and forth, but they're not approving anything other than your own zoning like they normally do.
Okay, so the way you put it that way, I'll follow that rationale.
Yeah.
If we join CMDA, you do have proposals that you would like our local TPZ to consider.
Yes.
What obligation do they have to sit down with you?
Obligation? They don't have any. I would have talked to them well before I gave them a recommendation, because I wouldn't just come out of the thin air and say, surprise, you should do this. But there's no obligation.
So by that point, you would have considered our input of our TPZ and there would have been conversations. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I might understand what you're asking, but maybe I don't. So we'll find out. CMDA, and David will correct me as well, if we get through all the next steps, meaning the town enters into an MOA passed by the Board of Selectmen with CMDA for a submitted district that is approved and is fine. What that means is that any project that goes through the normal process of going before TPZ, it has to follow our zoning, it goes through all the normal things that any normal project would have to go through to move forward, can turn to CMDA and see if they can help them with some of the funding.
Just as a quick example, so one of the things that's been discussed by the Affordable Housing Committee and our Plan and Zoning Commission is getting as high a percentage of affordable deed restricted units as we can for developments. What developers have told us is that's very hard to pencil out given our current zoning regulations and the cost of construction. So if we really wanted to kind of push that 20% affordable criteria for projects, that might be something where David could help with that financing through his organization to get us to the affordability that we want and also with the project that we want in terms of the scale and the scope of it.
I'll just add a compare and contrast. If we don't do this versus if we do this. If we don't do this, everything stays the same, right? All normal developers go through the regular TPC process that we all know. If we do this, and let's say it's and I'll give sort of the worst case scenario, if you will. The first selectman decides, you know what, we want to look at all three TODs. We want to look at BlackRock, Center, and Southport. David and his team come in, and this is totally Colin Colburn speculation here. They say, BlackRock, good to go. No changes required. They say downtown, needs some changes. Southport needs lots of changes. Goes to TPZ with those two TOD area recommendations. Meanwhile, BlackRock is just going through its normal process. Now there is one extra tool that is available to those developers if they want to use it for an example like Emmeline just gave. If they don't want to use it, they don't have to use CMDA, but there is now an option available for funding potentially for a developer, or maybe even for us as a municipality. We say, we want to figure out what the heck we should be doing with BJs long term. Like let's do an infrastructure study or something like that over there. So BlackRock's going to operate the same way as it does right now. For Fairfield Center and Southport, it might go to TPZ with those recommendations, and they very well may say, no, we're not making those changes. And then, okay, well, we're not doing any. We don't get CMDA funding in those two areas. So in that scenario, the only thing that CMDA is operating in our town is in Fairfield BlackRock. Hopefully that was helpful.
That was helpful. Thank you.
And they're only operating according to our zoning, period. Not outside our zoning, not an exception to our zoning. It's all within our zoning and with projects that are approved through the normal zoning process.
And even if they make recommendations, our TPZ can say no dice?
Yeah, and in Colin's example, if we make a recommendation downtown and they say no, then we don't have a district downtown and nothing downtown can benefit from our funding. But that's fine. And just to be, maybe this will help, like, once we do have a district, let's just stay on BlackRock for simplification's sake, right? We get to an MOA, we certify the zoning as is, we get to an MOA, it covers a geography in BlackRock. The way it would then function would be one of two things could happen. The town could come to us and say, we need a sewer upgrade on Commerce Drive to enable the development that we've zoned for. Can CMDA help us with that? and we would say, yes, maybe we'll help you go to the state for other funds, or a developer who owns a property on Commerce Drive who has a building that has been approved by your TPZ comes to us and says, I have a bank loan, but I still need $2 million more dollars. Will you loan me the other 2 million? And we structure that, right? So once you get to that stage, it's just about implementation of your plan and your zoning. Does that make sense? Like, we don't have an ongoing role in project approval, or I've seen the word oversight thrown around a lot. Like, no, there's no ongoing oversight. If a project is in accordance with your zoning and is approved and they need funding, they can come to us if they're in a district.
Thank you.
Again, it's being overused at this point. A tool in a toolbox. Like, I think that's just
A screwdriver for loose screws. I heard you.
Thank you, Representative Zezima.
Thank you, Liz Esma, District 4. So just a clarifying question, I think, for David and Emmeline both. So if we had property right now that we would like to develop,
Town owned or
well, here's my example. Everybody doesn't understand why we didn't buy the Exide property. Well, as I understand it, it's because our zoning at the time, or at any moment that we could have bid on it or investigated that purchase, would not have allowed, right? And here he comes, my favorite guy. May not have allowed the, the kind of, multi-use, project that we might have wanted to do. So here's my question. If we're talking a lot here about how everything conforms to our zoning regulations. My question is, at any point in this partnership, can we just decide to make a modification to our regulations to make a project work? In other words, we're not confined only to the footprint we have right this moment.
correct. Okay. Yes.
Yes. Yes, the Exide parcel was zoned industrial. It is zoned industrial. So
It would have had to be rezoned to
It would
do
have to
anything
be-
else that people are now saying, why didn't we do that?
Well, it would have to have been rezoned in order to allow for mixed use on that parcel. And so we didn't quite get that far. And, as happens, a private applicant wanted to do something else that is allowed by the present zoning. And so it will be a
Yeah.
Porsche dealership
The
instead.
market did what it wanted to do. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Blanchard.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. Thank you, Madam Moderator, Rob Blanchard, District 6. If I'm a proponent of local control, and I know that all of us are only able to control so much under 830G, how would this impact local control? Because it sounds like I'm still in charge of my own planning destiny, and I'm still having to abide by the POCD whenever that is approved. But how does this impact local control? It sounds like they kind of run concurrently together in a way, and that's still intact.
Yeah. It does not degrade local control in any way. Period. Right? I mean, it doesn't change the rules, that it doesn't change it doesn't change your own control at all.
It also does not solve for local control alone, right? Like,
Yeah, what you're I mean, the consultant comment is an apt one, right? We are at once a funding entity, we are a consulting and expertise entity, we are, to Mark's good point, a coordinator amongst state agencies. You're inviting us in to the table to sit with you, to help think through your development objectives in a very localized part of the town, to come up with solutions. We may make recommendations that would require local adoption or local modification, and then it is totally within the local control whether or not you act on those. But you're inviting us to the table based on our experience and expertise to say, oh, you didn't want a car dealership on that site? here's what the zoning could look like to get what you actually want in a way that makes market sense, and there's a gap and we can come in and help with the financing. Is that what you want to do? Okay, then here's how you do it, and now we hand it over to you to do, or not. But if not, then we're not going to give you money to help advance the prospect of that site that you care about. That's straightforward.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you all of you for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Before I move on to the rules to regulate, I'm going to ask for a show of hands, do we want to postpone this till next week's discussion? Anyone who's looking to postpone rules to regulate to next week? Everyone but Representative Steele? Oh, Representative Steele, one of the committee members, will not be here next week to vote on rules to regulate, huh?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I won't. I'm taking my family vacation next week. But I don't want to hold it up because of me, and I don't want to hold you guys here. So I really don't know what else we can do. You know.
Maybe you can write a statement for next week or
Sure.
something. That would be great, because we do want to vote on it sooner than later. We want this, they've done an incredible amount of work, the Rules to Regulate Committee, and we want to vote on it so that we can, but we're not voting on it this month anyhow, so we're not voting on it till next month. So next week, we'll have a discussion on that. Ethics still remains in the LNA committee. Hopefully they'll pass it out today so we can get it on our agenda and we can get it passed before the end of this term. Yep, we're going to still have committees. You can decide, committee chairs can decide what they want to do. We will now break off into our respective committees. For those online, please see the bottom of the warning for numbers to call into your respective committees. Chairs, please remember to record the meeting. It's the opinion of the chair whether they adjourn early or what they want to do. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned at 10:52.